Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Neglected Naruto kills the council elders. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by CarrotMaus and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Namikaze compound. Damn it. Said a 12-year-old boy in a tight black shirt, a pair of black cargo pants and boots. He had sun-kissed blonde hair and cerulean blue eyes. This was Naruto Namikaze, the neglected eldest child of Minato and Kushina Namikaze. The reason he was neglected, well, he didn't have any of the Kyuubi's energy sealed inside of him. Instead he had nothing. He then got up from his bed in frustration as he watches his quad siblings train with the legendary Sannin. The one training with Tsunade was a girl in an orange jumpsuit with an Uzumaki swirl on the back and a pair of black sandals. She had blonde hair like her father, but she had twintails as her hairstyle instead. This was Natsumi Namikaze, the youngest daughter of the Namikazes. Next, the one training with Orochimaru was another girl in an orange hoodie with an Uzumaki swirl on the back, a pair of black pants and a pair of blue sandals. She had red hair like her mother and it was tied in a ponytail. This was Mito Namikaze, the eldest daughter of the Namikazes, named after Tsunade's grandmother Mito Uzumaki. Finally, the one training with Uraya was a boy in a black shirt with an Uzumaki swirl on the chest area, a black hoodie, a pair of orange pants and a pair of black sandals. He had red hair like his mother and it was spiky in style. This was Menma Namikaze, the youngest son of the Namikazes. Though he was the youngest of the four, he was the next heir to the Namikaze clan. Naruto gritted his teeth while thinking about Menma's heir status. He still remembered that fateful day. Flashback. It was the quad's 7th birthday, and Naruto was only spending his birthday party with his only friends, Sasuke Uchiha, Hinata Hyuga and Raito Haddock, the son of Kakashi and Shizune, who married each other after Raito was born, which was by this time, 9 years ago. Sasuke gave Naruto some Kaiten Jutsu scrolls, Hinata gave him a few books about chakra theories, while Raito gave him a book about the legendary Gownins. The Gownins consisted of 5 ninjas who were very powerful. So powerful that they were the only ninjas to achieve SSSS rank ninja status. The 5 Gownins were very popular, but for some reason, they weren't taught in the academy. The leader, Levi Ackerman, was the master of the Haichu dual Kinjutsu technique. He was a short man who stood at 160 centimeters. During the Third Ninja War, he fought for Konoha alongside the other Gownins. He killed 60,000 enemy ninjas by using his famous jutsu called Haiten, Sadai Surashu, which makes him fly towards his enemy while slashing in a circle, causing possible decapitation. The only way a person could notice him is by seeing the way he dresses. During the war, he's usually in a white buttoned-up shirt with a brown jacket that had a wing emblem on his chest pocket. The jacket only measures at rib length. He also usually wears a cravat around his collar, a pair of white pants and a pair of brown boots. Even though it didn't fit the clothes of a ninja, it helps him fight in a lot of ways. He was known as Haichu in the bingo books for his amazing leadership in the war. Then, there's the Taijutsu expert named Shinsuke Nakamura. A master of the killer strong style Taijutsu technique. During the Third Ninja War, he paralyzed and killed 5,300 enemy ninjas just by using his famous jutsu called the Kinshasa, where he has to run towards his enemy while kneeing the person's face, which could cause a broken neck if hard enough. He stands at 188 centimeters, definitely taller than his leader Levi. He's known to wear a pair of red tights, a pair of black boots. He also wears black wristbands on both wrists and red armbands on both biceps. He had really weird hairstyle, or so it said on the book. He usually wears a red jacket that was waist length. He was known as Taijutsu no O, meaning king of Taijutsu in the bingo books for his amazing hand-to-hand combat abilities. Then, there's the ninjutsu expert named Hanzo Hasashi, also known as Scorpion. He was known to use hellfire techniques such as the Gokubushin. Clones made out of hellfire. During the Third Ninja War, he decapitated 45,000 enemy ninjas in 5 seconds thanks to his Gokushunshin. He stands at 189 centimeters, only 1 centimeter taller than Shinsuke. He's known to wear a black hood with a black skeletal mask that covers his face. He has pupilless eyes almost like the Hyuga, but when he opens his mask, you get to see a very handsome young man with a goatee. He wears ninja robes with yellow sashes on both shoulders with a belt wrapped around it, a pair of black pants and skeletal shoes. He also wears yellow gauntlets on both of his arms. He was known as the Go no Sasori, meaning Scorpion of Hell, for his ability to throw a kunai attached to his wrist faster than Minato could. Next was the Kinjutsu expert named Gintoki Sakata. During the Third Ninja War, he killed 60,000 enemy ninjas with his wooden sword called Toyobakudo. How did he do that? No one knows for sure. But he's known as the Shiroi Asha, meaning white demon, in the bingo books for his ability in killing people with a wooden sword. He stands at 177 centimeters. During battle, he's known to be unpredictable when it comes to attacks. At some point, he would shout random words, and some attacks would even pop out of nowhere. Such as the Rasengan. His sword fighting was rough, but it was powerful. He's known to wear a white yukata with a blue swirl pattern on the bottom and ends of the sleeves, worn so that his arm only goes through the left sleeve and the right half droops down over his obi. Over this, he wears a black belt buckled so that there is leftover dangling from the buckle, from which his bakugan hangs. Underneath, he wears a black red-lined shirt with a popped collar and black pants. He also wears knee-high black boots, buckled at the top and above his foot. Finally, there's the Fuinjutsu expert and arguably the strongest of them all named Shadow. He's known as the Kaikyoku no Ninja, meaning the ultimate ninja in the bingo books for his abilities in appearing and disappearing at will, stopping time with his famous Kanten Kanchiroru, and his mastery in his Fuinjutsu that is a million times better than any Uzumaki, even Mito herself. Nobody really knows how he really looks like, but it was rumored that he wears a black fur jacket, a pair of black anbu pants and black sandals. He usually wears either a black or white shirt under the jacket. He also wears fingerless gloves that allows him to use Fuinjutsu efficiently. Those were the legendary Gownins. But they were never seen in 9 years at that time. After Naruto was finished reading the book, he saw his father making an announcement. Minato then announced, "I would like to inform everyone that Menma will be the next clan head to the Namikazes." With that, everyone except Naruto, Kakashi, Shizune, Raito, Sasuke, Hinata, the Hyuga clan and the Uchiha clan clapped at the announcement. Kakashi looked at his sensei with shock, and so did Shizune, while the others checked on Naruto whether he was alright. Which Naruto bowed his head down so that no one could see his face. End of flashback. Naruto then sighed and decided to meet up with his senseis. With that, he went to his cupboard to grab his red and blue katanas and wrap them around his waist. The blue one is called Senshi, meaning 1,000 deaths, while the red one is called Kyofu no Ken, meaning Sword of Terror. Both katanas were really powerful, but if the Kyofu no Ken finds you not worthy, then you will die being the Shinigami's personal slave for life. Naruto then remembered something about the swords and how he got them. Another flashback. Naruto then got up and left the house to get to his comfort place and nearby training ground. With that, he simply went up to a tree and punched it hard. He then shouted as he continued punching, "Damn it, damn it, damn it." The more he punched, the more he felt tears streaming down his face. As he finished punching, he heard footsteps coming straight towards him. With that, Naruto turned around to see a man who stood at 188 centimeters in a pink shirt, a waist-length brown jacket, a pair of beige pants and a pair of black shoes. He had a twin-lens pink camera, or was it magenta? The man was holding 2 sheathed katanas. Naruto then said, "Who are you?" The man chuckled and said, "You're the third Naruto I have met. By the way, I'm Tsukasa Kadoya." Naruto looked at the man with a confused look and said, "What do you want?" Tsukasa chuckled yet again and said, "I'm giving you these swords." Naruto then got interested and said, "Okay, who would train me? Even my parents don't want to." Tsukasa shook his head and handed Naruto the katanas. He then said, "They'll be here. Trust me in this, remember that. Also, happy birthday." Naruto gladly took katanas and they gave a pulse when he grabbed them. He looked at the blades for a while. Both swords were heavy, but to him it was as if he held them before. As he was about to thank Tsukasa, he was already gone. End of flashback. Naruto sighed at the memory and went outside to meet up with his senseis at the Haichu's tea shop. As he got to the front door, he then remembered another memory of how he met his senseis, also known as the legendary Gownins. Yet another flashback. As he was about to unsheath both katanas, a voice of a man suddenly shouted, "Hoigaki, what are you doing here in the middle of the night? Don't you know it's cold?" Naruto looked up to see the leader of the Gownins, Levi Ackerman. Naruto simply had a shocked look and bowed down. He then said, "I know I shouldn't hide you." Levi looked at Naruto with a shocked look and got close to him. He then said, "How do you know my true identity?" Naruto then straightened himself and said, "It's because I did my studies to the point that I get bored in the academy." Levi then looked at Naruto again and said, "You look so much like Minato." Naruto flinched, which caused Levi to ask another question, "What's wrong?" Naruto then took a deep breath and said, "I'm his son. But he won't train me." Levi yet again looked at the boy with confusion and said, "Why not?" Naruto then shrugged and said, "Because I don't have the Kyuubi's energy in me, unlike my siblings." Levi looked at him with shock and thought, "Minato, how could you? To think that I thought you as a brother. I will never forgive you for this." Levi then cleared his throat and said, "I'll train you." Naruto looked at him with wonder and said, "Alright. But, I thought you can only use your swords." Levi then chuckled as they heard a voice saying, "Hey Haichu, aren't we supposed to go to your new store?" Naruto then looked behind Levi to see the other Gownins and their respective wives. Scorpion was standing beside a tanned woman who was wearing a plain pink kimono and a white obi. She had a veil on her face, and her yellow eyes could attract any guy's attention. Shinsuke was standing beside a nice-looking woman who was wearing a simple shirt and pants. And Toki was standing beside a fair woman with pink eyes who was wearing a black floral kimono and a black obi with fishnet socks that reached her thigh. She also had a scar on her left eye until her cheek. Shadow was standing beside a woman who was wearing a beautiful purple kimono with floral designs and a black obi. She had animalistic eyes just like her husband Shadow, only yellow in color. Levi then turned to look at them and said, "Guys, this is Naruto. Our new apprentice." Shadow simply widened his eyes while the other just nodded. Shadow then said, "Are you Minato's child?" Naruto nodded reluctantly and then Shadow then said, "He doesn't want to train you, right?" Naruto nodded again and Shadow got closer to him. He then gave a boy a pat on the shoulders and said, "Very well, you shall be our apprentice. Hope you enjoy our training. Anyways, let me introduce our wives to you." Shadow then pointed to his wife and said, "That's Blaze, my wife." He then pointed to Scorpion's wife and said, "That's Corp's wife, Melina. Don't let her fool you, she's actually ugly in the inside." Which received a glare from the woman. Shadow then pointed to Gintoki's wife and said, "That's Gintoki's wife, Tsukuyo." He then finally pointed to Shinsuke's wife and said, "That's Shinsuke's wife, but I don't really know her name. Just call her Nakamura-san." Naruto nodded and then said, "Does Levi-sensei have a wife?" Shadow nodded and said, "Yeah, but she's a Suna ninja though. But the thing is they already have 2 children." Which caused Naruto to nod even more. Then, Scorpion saw the katanas on Naruto's hands and said, "Hey Naruto, can I observe those swords on your hands?" Naruto nodded and gave him the katanas. Scorpion grabbed them and inspected the katanas. He then said, Yup, it's Senshi and Kyofu no Ken, alright." Which caused everyone there to widen their eyes, including Naruto. Naruto then muttered, "The most feared swords of all time." Scorpion then nodded while Gintoki said, "Very well, I shall teach you my Kinjutsu style, while Levi will teach you his Haichu dual Kinjutsu style." Levi then nodded while Shinsuke said, "Naruto-kun, I will teach the killer strong style Taijutsu. With this, you can learn my sacred Kinshasa." Then, Scorpion said, I guess it wouldn't be too bad to teach you some Shiri Ryu Jutsus." Finally, Shadow then put both of his hands on Naruto's shoulders and said, "I will teach you my style of Fuinjutsu and my Kanten Jutsus." Naruto looked at his new senseis with stars in his eyes and said, "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Sensei." Levi then crossed his arms and nodded. He then said, "Very well, tomorrow you will start your training with us. Meet all of us at this very spot." With that, Naruto teared up in happiness. End of flashback. Naruto chuckled at the memory and remember how he finished all of their training in the matter of 5 years, well, except for Shadow, because he was still in level 3. He then went in to see all of his senseis and their wives except for Levi. Levi then said as Naruto stepped into the store, "Hoigaki, go to the back because Shadow wants to talk to you." Naruto nodded as he and Shadow went to the kitchen. Shadow then grabbed both of his shoulders and said, "Naruto, today will be your final day of training with us. Now, I would like to give you my Taijutsu bloodline called the Kontongan, meaning Chaos Eye. It will help you predict and copy your enemy's attacks. It will also help you in using the Kanten Jutsus better and it helps you to increase your attributes in fighting. Now, take a deep breath." Naruto then took a deep breath while Shadow did some hand seals and shouted, "Kanten. Gan no Fikatsu." With that, Naruto felt a burning sensation on his eyes but shrugged it off. A few seconds later, the pain lessened and then went to the nearest mirror to see that his eyes were blood red with blacker eyes. He then looked at his sensei and said, "How do I cancel it?" Shadow smirked and said, "Just focus your chakra somewhere else." Naruto nodded, closed his eyes and did so. He then opened them back to see that his eyes were back to normal. Shadow chuckled and ruffled Naruto's hair. He then said, "You know, you are like the son I never had." Naruto looked at Shadow with bright eyes and said, "Really?" Shadow nodded and said, "Anyways, come outside, we got something to show you." Shadow then brought Naruto outside to see that they've prepared lunch for him. There was big pot of miso soup enough to share for 10 people, some bowls of rice, a plate of fried chicken and plate of giant turkey, which made Naruto to look at Gintoki with a look that said, "Really?" Gintoki just shrugged and all of them sat at the dining table to eat. As they were eating, Naruto accidentally saw Melina's face, then whispered to Shadow, "Geez, Melina-san is ugly." Shadow silently nodded and said, "Just leave it. Will ya?" With that, both then continued eating. After they finished their food, Naruto looked at the clock to see that it read 3:40. He then got up and bowed to everyone. He then said, "I've gotta go, senseis. Thank you very much." But before he left, Shadow stopped him and said, "Naruto, I got you something." Naruto turned around to see that Shadow was holding the black gauntlets he always wanted. Naruto looked at Shadow with tears of joy in his eyes and Tackle hugged him. Shadow returned the hug back and handed him the black gauntlets. The gauntlets covered the user's hands to his wrists. It had a wing pattern that goes from his knuckles to his wrists. Naruto then let go of the hug and put them on. He then clenched his fists and said thank you, Shadow Sentoushin. Shadow looked at him with a smile and said you're welcome Naruto. With that, Naruto got out of the store while Shadow went to Blaze and said, what a turn of events, huh? Blaze nodded in agreement and everyone got ready to open up a store again. Naruto then ran towards the nearest training ground to see Raito and Itachi train Sasuke. As he got there, he greeted all of them which they greeted back in return. Sasuke then said hey dope, ready for our spar. Taijutsu only. Naruto simply nodded to his best friend and said sure, team. With that, Sasuke got into his interceptor style, while Naruto used the academy-based Taijutsu style. Itachi who acted as Proctor, then shouted Hajime. With that, Sasuke charged towards Naruto at full speed and went to give him a punch to the face, only for him to be arm dragged by Naruto. Sasuke then fell on his back and growled in pain. A few seconds later, he quickly got up and tried to do a bicycle kick towards Naruto which succeeded. Naruto then took a few steps backwards in pain while grabbing his head. Sasuke then took the chance to roundhouse kick Naruto to the face. But somehow, Naruto caught both legs and powerbombed Sasuke to the ground which creating a crater. Sasuke growled in pain while rubbing his back. He then said fine, I yield. Itachi nodded and said winner, Naruto. Raito then clapped and gave Naruto a thumbs up while Itachi got his brother up. Sasuke then walked towards Naruto and both boys then gave each other a fist bump. Sasuke then said say Naruto, why don't you ever show your true abilities in the academy? Naruto then said I don't really want to. Sasuke then looked at his brother and all but blood with a confused and said when, then. Naruto crossed his arms and said maybe, tomorrow. Raito and Itachi then nodded in agreement. Raito then said say Naruto, my dad and mom would like to invite you to dinner. How does that sound? Naruto looked at his first friend and said yeah sure. Raito nodded and said to Itachi senpai, Naruto and I have to go and Sasuke, good luck. Itachi nodded and so did Sasuke. With that, Raito disappeared in a leaf shunshin while Naruto disappeared in a Goku shunshin. Kakashi's apartment. Raito and Naruto then arrived at the apartment to see Kakashi and Shizune preparing dinner, which was literally what Naruto had for lunch. Naruto then just shrugged his shoulders and then decided to eat anyways. While eating, Kakashi suddenly asked hey Naruto, I was wondering who are your senseis? Naruto then stopped eating for a second and said okay, don't freak out. All three Haddock members looked at each other and then nodded. Naruto then cleared his throat and said in a low but listenable voice the Gownins. Which caused all three to drop their chopsticks and looked at Naruto with shock. Kakashi then said are you sure? Naruto nodded and said hi. Shizune then said I thought that they were only myths. Naruto shook his head and said it's true. They really do exist. Raito simply nodded in agreement as Naruto told them about his training with them. After he finished his story, Kakashi and Shizune nodded in understanding. Naruto then looked at the time to see it read 6:30, which meant he had to go home. With that, Naruto got up and said Jana. He then left in a Goku shunshin. Namikaze compound. As he got there, Naruto quickly went upstairs to reach level 4 Fuinjutsu today. Not before noticing his other family members enjoying dinner at the dining room. He flinched at the sight and ran upstairs to his room. No one noticed this except for Natsumi. She then thought why does Aniki never eat with us she then said to her parents Tausen, Kasen. Have you ever noticed that Aniki never eats with us? With that, both parents looked at each other with shock while thinking Naruto. Oh Kami. Mito then thought about it and said when you think about it, yeah he hasn't been with us since our 7th birthday. Menma then snorted and said who cares? He's still a loser. I mean, he's the dead last of our class. Kushina then looked at her son and said what? Menma nodded and said yeah, he always seems to be trailing behind for some reason. As he finished his sentence, Minato then said Naruto, will you please come downstairs? A few seconds later, Naruto came downstairs with a level 4 Fuinjutsu book on his right hand. He then turned to his father and said yes to Sama. Minato then cleared his throat and said I decided that tomorrow, you will start your training with us. Naruto then closed his book and said I'm doing just fine on my own. Minato then looked at him with shock while Menma went up to his brother and said in an arrogant tone oh yeah, then why are you the dead last then? Naruto smirked and said that's because I'm hiding my true strength. Just you wait, dear brother. I will show you my true power tomorrow. He then flared his Kontongan towards Menma which caused Menma to feel fear. Naruto then cancelled the Taijutsu and went upstairs to his room to get some sleep. He then flopped onto the bed while placing Senshi and Kyofu no Ken next to the door. He then let both arms behind his head and said senseis, I won't let you down. With that, he went to sleep and dreamt of a busty Hinata in a bikini. Chapter 2. The next day. Naruto woke up with he saw his condition, he then quickly wiped his nose off and looked at his alarm clock to see it read 6:30 am, too early for a 12-year-old to wake up. With that, he quickly got up from his bed and did a few stretches to limber up for the day. Naruto then decided to get a short shower which calmed him down for the exam today. After that, he got into his normal shinobi clothes and ninja equipment. As he finished doing so, he decided to get out of the house to meet up with Raito for advice. By the time he got out, Raito was already there waiting for him. Raito then quickly said, "Yo, Naruto." Naruto simply gave his surrogate brother his foxy smile and said, "Yo, Raito Naichin. How are you today?" Raito didn't say anything but patted Naruto's shoulders. He then said, "Well Naruto, today is your ninja graduation exam and all I can say is well show everyone your abilities." Naruto simply nodded and said, "Sure, I'll teach everyone for their neglectment and ignorance. Neglectment from my family and ignorance from the villagers." Raito simply nodded and said, "Sure Naruto, I have a mission to go to. I won't be here for a few days." Naruto sighed and nodded in sadness for not being able to meet up with his surrogate brother for a few days. Raito noticed the face made by the young boy. He then grabbed both of Naruto's shoulders and said, "Don't worry Naruto, I'll be fine. I'm the son of the Kakashi Haddock after all." Naruto simply chuckled and said, "Yeah, see you later Raito Naichin." Raito nodded and said, "See you later Atautu." He then turned around and disappeared in a shunshin. Naruto sighed and then decided to have some breakfast near a bakery. Random bakery. As he got there, he quickly got himself to the bread aisle and got himself a melon bun. He then quickly went to the counter and paid for it. As he got out of the bakery, he quickly ate it and threw the wrapper at a nearby bin. Naruto then looked at a nearby clock to see it read 8 o'clock, which means he had 30 minutes until the graduation exams. With that, he grasped both of his katanas by the handle and quickly ran towards the academy. The academy. As he got there, he was greeted by the sight of Sasuke, Shikamaru, Choji, Shino and Hinata, Naruto's only friends in the academy. This is because most of the kids in the academy are usually seen hanging out with his siblings. Thus, causing Naruto to only have 5 friends or 4 friends since Hinata and him became a couple a few days ago. Heck, even Hinata's dad, Hiashi was fine with it. As Naruto got closer to them, he was hugged by Hinata, which caused both parties to blush since they both dreamt of each other, while the other boys were chuckling because all 4 had blackmail material on Naruto. Shikamaru and him became friends after Naruto beat him in a game of shogi. Choji became friends with Naruto because of Shikamaru, while Shino became friends with Naruto because Naruto and him had similar tastes in certain divisions. Naruto then let go of the hug and said, "Hey Haim, how you doing?" Hinata blushed at the nickname and said, "DD doing GG good, Naruto K-kun." Naruto chuckled and grabbed her by the arm. He then led her to his other friends. As they got to the others, they instantly let go and Sasuke said, "Hey dope, you're going to show your true self today." Naruto simply nodded and said, "Definitely, I'll show everyone that no one should underestimate anyone especially me." With that, his friends and girlfriend nodded and Naruto said while clamping his fist, "Anyways, let's do this thing." They then went into their class and was treated by Menma, talking about how great he would be in the exams, while his sisters were face-palming hard. When Naruto and the others got in, almost all of Sasuke's fangirls ran towards Sasuke. But since Sasuke had trained with Naruto a bit, he quickly Goku Shunshin into his seat. Everyone in the room except for Naruto, Shino, Shikamaru, Choji and Hinata since they were already thought that move were simply shocked. Menma then quickly ran towards Sasuke and said, "Who taught you that move, Sasuke?" Sasuke then kept quiet and said, "HN. Menma, not being the one liked being ignored said, "Hey. I said who taught you that just to?" The tick mark could be seen on Sasuke's forehead and he said in a very quiet tone, "Your brother." Menma then said, "What? The dope. How could he teach you that? He's just a loser." While everyone else except for his sisters nodded in agreement. Suddenly, a number of claps could be heard in the room. Menma then looked for the source of the sound and saw Naruto was the one clapping. Naruto then said in a raspy voice, "TSK, dear brother. Sasuke is really telling the truth. Because, I really taught him that." Menma was about to say something but was interrupted by Sakura, one of Sasuke's fangirls, and Naruto supposed crush said, as if, "I'm sure you can't even do the move yourself. Aren't you just my lost puppy?" Naruto shook his head and said, "I'm not the loser you thought I was. Everything will be revealed today in the exams and Banshee, I like Hinata Haim not you." Everyone except for his friends were like Nani. Naruto then laughed while grabbing Hinata's arm and Goku Shunshin to the furthest seat from the blackboard. Sakura, who wasn't exactly shocked from Naruto's retort, decided to smile and thought, "So, you finally decided to show your true self Naruto." Well, both sisters looked at each other and thought, this is Iniki's true self. Naruto simply sat at the back while caressing Hinata's right hand with his left and both were looking at each other in the eye, not caring about their surroundings. A few seconds later, Haruka came in and for once was shocked that his students were totally quiet for once. He then asked Ino, a blonde-haired Yamanaka, "Why is everyone quiet?" Ino then pointed towards Naruto and said he's acting out of character today. Iruka then looked at Naruto, who just gave a simple smile towards him. Iruka simply smiled back and thought, so you finally did it, Naruto. Iruka then cleared his throat and said, okay everyone, today is the graduation exams, so let's do the written tests first. Mizuki, please hand out the papers. Suddenly, a white-haired chunin appeared named Mizuki appeared with a stack of papers. Mizuki then gave each student a piece of paper. The moment Naruto got his paper, he noticed that his questions were Jounin level. He then sighed and quickly did a ram hand seal. He then shouted Kai. And his questions turned into the normal graduation questions. With that, Naruto quickly finished his questions, but also noticing Mizuki's face that showed the look of shock. It seemed as if he was observing it how Naruto would answer the questions and thought that he was failing, but it turns out that he didn't answer a single question wrong. Later, the bell rung that signaled that it was time to let go of their pencils. With that, Iruka announced, alright kids, pencils down. Every student then let go of their pencils and Kiba, a loud mouth in Izuka said HMPH, the dope will get the worst marks here as usual. By the time he said that, Iruka was already holding Naruto's paper and said I'm not too sure about that Kiba. I think Naruto got the best marks here this time. I mean every question he answered in the paper were very accurate. Naruto, I didn't know you were a genius. Naruto smirked and said the ninja's best skill is deception, right, sensei? Iruka simply nodded with a smile, while Mizuki clenched his fists in frustration. Later, both chunins grabbed everyone's papers to mark them. While they were marking, almost everyone in the room got closer to Naruto and gave him a Kana session. From questions like who trained you? And what made you so strong? Naruto only answered a few since he didn't want to reveal too much. A few minutes later, Iruka came to the room and announced, alright kids, the next test is the shuriken and kunai one, so come on, let's go to the shuriken field. With that, everyone ran towards the shuriken fields. Shuriken fields. When they got there, Mizuki said, alright everyone, now I want all of you to throw your shurikens and kunai onto the targets when your name will be called out, and Iruka and I will see how accurate you are with both. With that, everyone waited for their name to be called out. While Naruto waited for his name to be called, he saw all of his friends and girlfriends' scores. Shikamaru scored 7 on both shuriken and kunai, while Choji scored 6 on both, and so did Shino. While Hinata scored 8 on both, which shocked everyone, even the senseis, since Hyugas are not known to be good with shuriken and kunai. Meanwhile, Sasuke scored 9 on both, which didn't surprise anyone since he was called a prodigy. Then, it was Naruto's turn. When he got to his target, he noticed his brother snarling at him. Naruto simply shrugged it off and waited for Iruka to say start. The moment Iruka said start, Naruto already threw a shuriken onto his first target dead center and threw a kunai attached to a rope towards another target dead center as well. Which meant Naruto scored perfect 10s on both shuriken and kunai. Everyone's jaw simply dropped to the floor except for his friends, girlfriend and Sakura, especially his siblings, or more specifically Menma. Menma looked at his older brother with anger, while Natsumi and Mito looked at him with awe. Even with special training with their father, they could only score 8s on both. Iruka simply clapped with joy, and so did Mizuki, but with more anger into it. With that, Naruto was given a standing ovation. As Naruto pulled back his kunai and grabbed his shuriken, Iruka came up to him and said, wow Naruto, I knew you had it in you. Why would you hide all of this? With that, Naruto simply chuckled and said, I am good with deception, that's all. Iruka simply nodded with a smile as he filled in Naruto's marks into a form on his hands. He then announced, alright, next up the Taijutsu test. Come on everyone. Everyone nodded as they went towards another room that had a stage on it. Iruka then announced, okay everyone, you'll be partnered up with each other except for Naruto, since there's too many students. Instead, Mizuki will test your Taijutsu. Is that okay, Naruto? Naruto shrugged and said sure, why not? Well, Mizuki thought, haha, now I can humiliate that disgrace for good and I can finally execute the plan that I wrote in a piece of paper in my left pocket of my trousers. Soon, Lord Hisako will give me the power that I need. A few minutes later, Naruto's name was called and everyone except for the ones who accepted his strength thought that he won't last a second. Oh how wrong they was. When Naruto got to the stage, Mizuki was already in his fighting stance. With that, Naruto raised the back of his right hand to his mouth while extending his other hand sideways, thus creating a dab stance. His legs were closed together as well. This shocked everyone except for the ones who already knew of his strength since Naruto's been known to use the Academy Taijutsu style. Then, Iruka, who recovered from shock and acted as proctor, shouted Hajime. With that, Mizuki charged towards Naruto and tried to punch him only for Naruto to grab the fist and knee him in the ribs with his right leg. With that, Mizuki felt as if he'd been ran over by a train. He then clutched his slightly injured rib and growled in pain. Naruto then smirked and said to Iruka, call it off, he won't be able to get up again. Iruka nodded and was about to call it off when Mizuki got up and charged towards Naruto. Naruto simply sighed and tapped both of his feet to get a Kinshasa ready. So he filled both of his legs with chakra and ran towards Mizuki. He then jumped and kneed Mizuki in the face while shouting Kinshasa, thus causing Mizuki to have a concussion, and a small piece of paper fell from his left pocket of his trousers. Naruto then went to grabbed it and read it. Make Naruto fail the exams, ask him to take the forbidden scroll as a makeup exam, kill him and run away with the scroll to give it to Hisako-sama. Naruto then shook his head and gave the paper to Iruka. As Iruka gave it a read, he then shouted Anbu. Then 3 Anbus appeared and one of them asked Iruka what's the problem. Iruka then gave the Anbu the piece of paper and the Anbu read it. The Anbu then nodded and said to the other Anbu, come on, let's take away this traitor. The other Anbu nodded and 3 of them alongside Mizuki disappeared in a shunshin. The other students were confused and Iruka then answered, Mizuki-sensei has been confirmed to be a traitor because he planned to fail Naruto. Menma, who was still angry that Naruto had beaten him again, said he should have failed. Why didn't you just let him? Iruka was about to answer that question with a scolding, but Naruto answered, dear brother, he was also planning to steal the forbidden scroll by using me. With that, everyone stayed quiet, not knowing what to say to the side of Naruto that they never knew existed. Menma simply stayed quiet and was given a bonk on the head by his sisters each. Naruto then smirked and went to the back row to sit near his friends and girlfriend. Iruka simply sighed and went to fill in everyone's scores. While Iruka was doing so, Naruto was confronted by Menma, who grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. He then said, how are you so strong, you loser? I mean, we've been trained by Tausen, Kasen and the legendary Sannin, but you? Who trained you, you loser? The atmosphere then turned tense and everyone looked at both brothers waiting for a huge punch out between both. Naruto then yawned and grabbed both of his brother's hands, making Menma to let go of his collar. He then said, foolish brother, I'm not as weak as you say. I'll only say this once, one of my masters is a brother to Tasama. That's all. Now, kindly let go of me. Menma then pushed away his older brother and sat at his own seat waiting for Iruka to announce something. A few minutes later, Iruka came in and announced, alright, I have an announcement to make. Naruto is the Rookie of the Year, while Hinata is the Kunoichi of the Year, with Sasuke and Sakura behind respectively. With that, everyone clapped for both Naruto and Hinata, except for Menma, who shouted he must have cheated. There's no way that loser can be better than me. Naruto then wiggled his index finger and said, TSK foolish brother, I did say I'll show you my true power today, didn't I? Menma then snarled at him and said, PSSSH, you beat a weak Chunin instructor. So what? Iruka then chuckled at Menma and said, Menma, Mizuki was a Chunin who should have became Jounin this year. So, if you say he's weak then think again. Menma then simply kept quiet while both of sisters looked at their older brother with awe yet again. Natsumi and Mito then thought at the same time, Aniki, we'll make this right. Naruto then shrugged and still caressed Hinata's right hand. Hinata simply blushed at the gesture but also noticed lustful eyes from the female part of the number of students. She then activated her Byakugan to make a look that said, don't touch my Naruto-kun, which caused all of them to feel fear. Iruka then said, alright kids, now let's do the jutsu test. Now, come on to the next room to test out your ninjutsu abilities. Yet again, everyone nodded and left for the next room. As they got there, Iruka announced, okay children, all of you will do the following jutsus, the Kawarimi no Jutsu, the Bushin no Jutsu and the Henge no Jutsu. When I call your name you will do those jutsus that I have stated. You may also show us any additional jutsus. Understand? Everyone nodded and Iruka took a seat. He then announced everyone's names. Everyone did their jutsus with not error, with a few clan member ninjas doing their bloodline jutsus. Itsumi and Mito turned out to have inherited their mother's chakra chains. So, they showcased them during their turn and Naruto had to admit it was awesome to that ability. When it was Menma's turn, he snarled at Naruto and did all 3 jutsus tremendously. He then said to Iruka, can I do any extra jutsus, Iruka-sensei? Iruka nodded and Menma simply smirked. He then clenched his right hand out and opened it. Then, a swirling sound could be heard. It turns out, a Rasengan was formed on his hand. Menma then smirked again and said to the other kids including Naruto, this is Tausen's Rasengan. It can cause repulse to anyone. Now, observe. Menma then slammed the Rasengan towards an unfortunate dummy. The dummy then flew into a wall, thus causing crater on it. Menma then smirked at Naruto and said, beat that, loser. Then, Naruto's name was announced. As he got to Iruka, he said, Iruka-sensei, does it have to be any Bushin? Because, my chakra reserves are really big. Iruka simply nodded and said sure, why not? Naruto simply smirked and did the shunshin by replacing himself with a certain closet pervert named Ibisu. Ibisu was seen reading a certain book that had a lady in a bikini on it. When he realized where he was, he literally blushed in embarrassment and fainted. Then, he poofed away to reveal Naruto. With that, Iruka chuckled and said, "Okay Naruto, now do the henge if you don't mind." Naruto then nodded and did a hand seal. Suddenly, he turned into a certain brunette tall man wearing a pink shirt, a black jacket, a pair of grey dockers and a pair of black business pants. He also had a twin-lens reflex camera hung around his neck. Naruto transformed into Tsukasa Kadoya, the man who changed his life. Iruka was simply impressed by the transformation, and so did everyone. Menma then asked, "Who's that loser, dope?" Naruto as Tsukasa said, "This is Tsukasa Kadoya, the man who changed my life. He was the one who gave me Senshi and Kyofu no Ken." He then changed into his normal self and caressed the hilts of both of his katanas. Iruka nodded and said, "Okay Naruto, now do any type bushin if you please." Naruto nodded, then did a number of hand seals quickly. Suddenly, he finished with a ram hand seal and shouted Goku Bushin no Jutsu. Suddenly, two perfect clones of Naruto appeared from the ground with fire blazing around it. Naruto then said, "These are my Goku Bushins. They can only dispel by will, and if you try to punch them, then you will be burned by hellfire." Iruka nodded and both clones dispelled. He then said, "Very impressive, Naruto. Yup, you really are the rookie of the year. Well done." Naruto then said, "May I do an extra jutsu, sensei?" Iruka was confused by this, but said, "Sure, Naruto." Naruto nodded and did what Menma did, but instead of a blue sphere, a dark one appeared instead. He then slammed it towards a dummy, and the dummy exploded upon impact. Which shocked everyone. Naruto then said, "That was my Dakisufia, a jutsu that can take away chakra from the victim and may cause death or explosion if powerful enough." But that, Iruka nodded and told Naruto to sit down. Naruto then bowed and sat on his usual spot while Menma thought, "This Tsukasa Kadoya. How dare he? Why would he change the loser's life? When he should help me become stronger." Unknown to anyone, Tsukasa was observing them from a rooftop. He overheard what happened and chuckled. He then said, "Heh, the Gaki's brother is really angry of me. Oh well, not everyone loves me." He then disappeared in a glassy grey wall. Meanwhile with Naruto and the others, Iruka announced, "Alright kids, all of you are now Genins, no one failed. Now, let me give all of you your hit I-8. With that, everyone got their hit I-8. The moment Naruto got his, he wrapped it around his forehead. When everyone got their hit I-8, Iruka then announced, "Alright everyone, now I'm totally proud of all of you, especially Naruto who exceeded my expectations. Well done." Naruto simply shook his head while smiling and said, "Sensei, I'm not that good. If it wasn't for Tsukasa Kadoya, I would never be like I am now." Iruka chuckled and said, "Oh come on, Naruto. I'm proud of you, totally am." Now, everyone class dismissed. With that, everyone left the room to the front gates to meet up with their families. Sasuke, Shikamaru, Choji and Shino were congratulated by their parents. While Hiashi was in complete shock when he heard that Hinata became the Kunoichi of the year. Which he simply cried on her shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you." Naruto smiled at his friends and girlfriends' treatment by each of their family. He then turned around to see his own parents congratulating his siblings. Minato then noticed Naruto and got close to him. He then grabbed both of his shoulders and said, "Please, tell me you did okay." Mito then came to both of them and said, "Aniki did better than okay, he's the rookie of the year." Minato and Kushina was shocked by what Mito said and was kind of proud but felt guilty at the same time. Minato then said, "Well done, son." Naruto didn't say anything but pushed away Minato's hands and turned around. He then did a few hand seals and disappeared in a Goku Shunshin. Minato and Kushina were in complete shock and Minato thought, the Goku Shunshin, no way. Could he be receiving training from Hanzo? But, he's been missing for more than 10 years. So did Levi. Oh my dear Atautu. Minato then turned around to his other children and said, "Who trained him?" Itsumi was the one to answer the question by saying he said something about one of them being your brother figure, I believe. With that, Minato and Kushina looked at each other and thought Levi. Meanwhile with Naruto, he was seeing his senseis at the usual spot, Haichu's tea shop. They were having lunch which consists of ramen this time since it's Naruto's graduation party. As they were eating, Gintoki said, "So, how did it go?" Naruto simply shrugged and said, "I kinda overdid it today." With that, Gintoki nodded and said, "Well, at least you didn't end up being known in that facade." Naruto simply nodded and they finished their lunch in peace. As they finished lunch, all of Naruto's senseis congratulated him and told him how proud they were of him. Later, Naruto left the shop with boxes of gifts he received from his senseis. He then quickly got home and went to his room to place all of his stuff there. Naruto then looked at his clock to see it read 3:30, which meant he had a few more hours to kill before having dinner. He then decided to train at a nearby training field. Naruto then ran downstairs and left the house for the nearby training ground. As he got there, he realized that Raito was there. With that, Naruto ran towards his brother figure and slapped him in the face. Raito suddenly felt a stinging sensation on his cheek and turned around to see Naruto. He then said, "Hey Naruto, congratulations." Naruto then pouted and said, "Raito Naichin, you lied. You said that you'll be back in a few days." Raito laughed and said, "Did I say a few days? Sorry, I meant a few hours. Haha." Naruto shook his head and said, "You better hope I don't get your dad as my Jounin sensei." Raito shook his head and said, "You're probably getting me or Anko Nichin or both of us as your senseis, since you've hidden your true strength." Naruto shook his head this time in response and said, "The tallest mountain started as a stone, I once was weak, but now I've grown." Raito chuckled as they stared at the sun and said, "You sure did, Naruto. You sure did." Chapter 3. A few hours later. Minato is now seen having a council meeting with the Shinobi and Civilian Council about the team placements alongside the Sanins and a few Jounins. Minato then stood up from his seat and said, "Welcome the Council of Konoha. Today in our meeting, we will be discussing about the team placements for the newly graduated Genins. Now, any suggestions?" Amura, one of the elder council, then spoke first. "Hokage-sama, I say that Menma, Natsumi and Mito should be in a team with your only living student Kakashi as their sensei. They would make an amazing squad, I would say." This caused every member of the council to discuss between themselves. A few seconds later, everyone nodded. With that, Minato nodded and said, "Very well, that can be arranged." He then turned to the side and said to Kakashi, "Is that okay with you, Kakashi?" Kakashi simply sighed since he wanted to be Naruto's sensei, but what choice did he have? With that, Kakashi reluctantly nodded. Even with his mask on, Minato could sense that Kakashi was sad because of something. He'll need to ask him later. Minato then looked at the other members of the council and said, "Any other suggestions?" With that, almost every member of the council were quiet, thinking for suggestions. Suddenly, Kaharu, another elder, got up and said, "Hokage-sama, I believe Kunai was talking about making a track team of sorts. So, why not have her being the sensei of Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inyazuka and Shino Aburame? With the Byakugan of the Hyugas, the advanced smell of the Inyazukas and the Kakechu of the Aburams. Imagine that." With that, Minato stroked his chin for a moment and thought about it. He then nodded and said, "Well, that will be a quite unstoppable team. Don't you think so, Hiashi, Tsume and Shibi?" Tsume, the clan head of the Inyazukas, and Shibi, the clan head of the Aburams, simply nodded while Hiashi, the clan head of the Hyugas, nodded and said, "Alright then, let my daughter be in the team with Kunai. I think it might even break her out of her shy stature." Minato then nodded, looked at Kunai and said, "Will that fit your descriptions of a track team, Kunai?" With that, Kunai simply nodded with no questions asked. Then, Asuma, as the clan head of the Sarutobi since his father Hiruzen died during the Sealing the Fox, raised his hand and suggested, "Hokage-sama, I suggest the next Ino-Shikacho formation as my team. Will that be fine?" With that, Minato nodded and asked Inogen, "Shikaku and Choza, will that be okay, all three of you?" Inogen was a bit reluctant about it, but just nodded while Shikaku said, "This is troublesome. Fine, I guess it'll benefit my son." Choza didn't think much about it and nodded. Minato was about to ask for more suggestions, but Danzo stopped him by saying, "I think that's enough. I mean, sure, Sasuke Uchiha, Sai, Sakura Haruno and Yakumo Kurama passed, but the numbers are too much with that." Almost every civilian council member and the elders nodded. Minato was confused by this and asked, "What do you mean only 4 of them? Naruto passed as well. He was even elected as Rookie of the Year." Kaharu then slammed her table and said, "Why do you need a disgrace of the Namikazes in the shinobi forces? I mean, he's nothing but a disgrace." With that, all of the civilian council and the elders nodded in agreement while the shinobi council facepalmed. Minato was yet again shocked by this and said, "Who told you that he was a disgrace, Elder Kaharu?" Then, Jiraiya raised his hand and said, "It's true, Minato. I mean, he doesn't even have the Kyuubi's chakra nor the soul. So, I say he should stay as a civilian." Minato then became speechless and gave himself a thought, "Naruto, I'm sorry. Nidame-sama gave them too much power." As Minato was about to deliver his final decision, the main door suddenly swung open to reveal a man that had graying-black spiky hair, red eyes, and slight stubble along his jawline. With a red tattered cloak, he wore a gray dress shirt with a long tail, black dress pants, and black dress shoes. He was also wearing a ring on his right index finger, 2 other rings on his right fourth finger, and a necklace with a crooked cross-shaped pendant. As the man got in, he said, "It really turns out that the boy's godfather neglects him even more than his own parents." The man then took a swig of his drink that he was holding. Everyone in the room was simply speechless by the sudden appearance of the man. With that, 4 Anbas appeared in front of him, and one of them, seemingly the leader, said, "Halt, state your name and reason you are interrupting this meeting." The man then chuckled and raised his arms in the air. He then said, "I'm Crow Branwin and I'm here because I have a message from someone." He was then interrupted by Minato, who said, "Who's that someone?" The man, who was identified as Crow, put down his arms and said with a raspy voice, "I believe that he calls himself the Sekai no Hakeshi." But that, the atmosphere turned dark. Everyone in the room was speechless. Even Danzu was pissing his pants silently. Minato then cleared his throat and said, "Are you sure that he calls himself that, Crow-san?" Crow then chuckled as he put his hands in his pockets and said, "You know, I wasn't really originated in this world. I originated from a world called Remnant where we fight monsters with not chakra, but dust instead. Anyways, I actually died there while lying on my wife, Winter's lap." Everyone was confused by this, and Orochimaru then asked, "Then, how are you here, Crow-san?" Crow then chuckled and said, "You see, the Sekai no Hakeshi revived me with a deal. He told me to give you insolent bleep a message and I'll return to my world alive and well. So please, do me a favor and let me do my part of the deal." With that, Minato got interested and asked, "Could you please tell us the message that he wanted to send?" Crow then nodded and cleared his throat. He then said, "You must allow Naruto to be in a team. Or else, I will destroy this world and the shinobi era will be over." With that, everyone was speechless except for Jiraiya, who snorted and said, "PSSH, yeah right. If he really was a destroyer of worlds, then he should be the one who gives the message." Crow simply shrugged and said, "He really is. I mean, someone who can revive you is really saying something." Jiraiya was about to protest up until a blonde-haired Asian man in a warlord armor appeared out of nowhere and said, "Jiraiya, I believe you should be quiet. I mean, I'm a god and yet, I'm afraid of Tsukasa Kadoya." With that, everyone was silent and the man looked at Crow. He then said, "Crow, Tsukasa informed me to tell you that you should continue with your part of the deal. Now go meet up with Naruto." With that, Crow nodded and the man snapped his fingers so that Crow could disappear in a flash of light. Jiraiya then closed his open mouth and said, "Are you the Sekai no Hakeshi?" The man shook his head and said, "No, I'm Kouta Kazuraba. A god basically. You see, the Sekai no Hakeshi is my ally and when he says something serious, he is absolutely serious. So, I say that you should definitely place Naruto in a team with Sasuke, Sai, Yakumo and Sakura." Minato then cleared his throat and said, "Who do you suggest as their Jounin sensei, Kouta-san?" "I mean, I have Heiichi Gekko to become Sai's and Yakumo sensei, but what about my eldest son?" The man or god who identified himself as Kouta said, I think joint Jounins should do the job. Why not have Anko and Raito Haddock? Don't you agree, Orochimaru and Kakashi?" Orochimaru quickly nodded since he doesn't want any trouble with a god, while Kakashi gave Kouta his infamous eye smile. Kouta smiled and turned around to leave. But was interrupted by Danzo, who shouted, "Root." This shocked every Konoha member in the room, who expected Root to be disbanded. Danzo then smirked as all of his Root unit stopped Kouta from leaving. He then said, "Take this man for questioning, he's a threat to our plans." But that, all of the Root members nodded while Minato said, "Danzo, don't do this." Danzo simply shook his head and said with a power-hungry tone, "He's no god. He's just really powerful. I say we should kidnap him and take his power so that we could mass-produce it." As Minato was about to call them off, Kouta simply chuckled and said, "Well, Tsukasa was right about you, Danzo. Oh well, I guess I owe him a nice fruity dessert now." Kouta then took out his Sengoku driver and placed it on his waist. He then took out a lock and pressed a button. It then announced, "Fruit basket." Kouta then smiled at the root anbus and placed his Kiwami lock seed onto a slot of his driver. It then announced, "Lock on." This got everyone interested at what the god could do. Kouta then shouted Henshin and pressed a katana-like button. It then announced, "Lock open, Kiwami arms. Die, 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 Shogun." Suddenly, he transformed into a shiny armored warrior named Game and he was in Kiwami arms. With that, everyone in the room was in complete shock by the transformation. Especially, a certain Warhawk. Kouta's Game then took out his sword and said, "This is my stage, now." He then got into a stance just to wait for the root anbus to attack, which really happened. The first root anbu tried to kick Kouta in the face and succeeded, but Kouta was simply unfazed by it. With that, Kouta did a yawning gesture and slashed all of the root anbus in one strike. Which caused a very bloody mess. Kouta then turned towards Danzo and said, "People like you are truly scum. However, I won't kill you." This caused Danzo to feel a bit tad relieved, but Kouta continued, "But I didn't say anything about Tsukasa doing the favor. Ain't that right, Sekai no Hakeshi?" Everyone in the room got confused by what the god said up until a sudden glassy grey well appeared to reveal Tsukasa, Kamen Rider Decade. The destroyer of worlds. Tsukasa smirked at Kouta and said, "Kouta, I believe you have more duties at your world if you don't mind." Kouta then cancelled his transformation and smiled back. He then held out his palm to summon a random zip to open. He then went into it and said, "Well, it was fun meeting you all. Tsukasa, do your part." Tsukasa nodded as the random zip closed. He then walked up to Danzo and said, "You are a little piece of bleep. you know that. Just because you believe that by being ruthless means that you're strong, that isn't necessarily true. I mean, I've met up with a half-cousin of mine who cares for her family in another world and she was worth 100 soldiers. Danzo was about to protest, but another gray glass wall appeared behind Tsukasa to reveal Tsukasa's half-brother, Levi Ackerman Kadoya. Dark Decatur Haichu that he would prefer. He was wearing what Tsukasa would wear, but instead of a camera, there was a caravat. This shocked everyone in the room since they thought the Levi in this world is dead. Levi then spoke up, Tsukasa, I'll take it from here. After all, by being rough is the only way one could finally understand. Tsukasa sighed and said, Levi, you were supposed to take care of your wife and children. Don't worry, I know what to do. Levi shrugged and Minato said, Itaudo, is that you? Levi shook his head and said, I'm sorry Namikaze-sama, I am not your surrogate little brother. I am from another world. However, your little brother is still alive. Levi then disappeared the same way he appeared and Tsukasa grabbed Danzo by the neck. He then threw Danzo to the ground and kicked him in the face. He then looked at Fugaku, the clan head of the Uchihas, and said, Fugaku-san, do you remember that day when your nephew Shisui left the village and was branded as a traitor? Well, you see, the reason that happened was because of the son of Bleep. He manipulated Shisui into joining Root and asked Shisui to kill all of the Uchiha. But he failed, courtesy of your eldest son. This caused Fugaku to flare his shuriken and said to Minato, Hokage-sama, let me kill this bastard. Minato nodded, but Tsukasa shook his head and said, I'll do it, he's nothing more than a parasite of this world. Danzo then did a pleading face towards Tsukasa. But Tsukasa shook his head and took out his Raibuker and sword. He then slit Danzo's throat and blood started to splatter around from it. Tsukasa then dusted his hand and slowly stomped on Danzo's head while saying, enjoy your life in hell. Danzo Shimura. Danzo couldn't say anything but squirm as he was holding his slitted throat. Everyone else in the room couldn't bear to look at Danzo's condition, except for Fugaku who enjoyed every last moment of it. Danzo then widened his eyes and became immobilized. Which would mean that he was dead. Tsukasa then sighed and looked at Jiraiya with a very angry look. Tsukasa then said, hey Iro-senin, all of the children that you think is the child of the prophecy is none of them. You will realize it when the time is right. This caused Jiraiya's face to turn pale, while everyone else except for Minato, Tsunade and Orochimaru were confused. Tsukasa then looked at Minato with a Biju worth of killing intent and said, Minato, please fix your relationship with Naruto. I mean, he's not a disgrace. He's your son. So please, don't do the same mistake as a few fathers before me did. Minato trembled at the killing intent and nodded. With that, Tsukasa smiled and disappeared the same way he appeared. With that, everyone got quiet for a few seconds up until Minato said, that's decided, Naruto Namikaze, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, Sai and Yakumo Kurama will be in a team with Anko Mitarashi and Raito Haddock as their sensei. Am I clear? Everyone furiously nodded and Minato announced, with that said, meeting adjourned. With that, everyone got up from their seats and left the room. As they left, Minato massaged his temples and said to his Anbu guard bear, clean this mess up. I think Levi would have turned into his Kamimoto and would have tried to kill me. Bear simply nodded and went to clean the bloody mess. Minato then sighed and said, what a recent turn of events. But Naruto. Naruto was training his Taijutsu and Kinjutsu at a random training ground. As he was slashing a random dummy, he heard a number of footsteps coming towards him. He then turned around and held out Senshi frontward preparing for a random attack. Just to see Crow, who was clapping his hands. He then said, you got skills Naruto. Naruto was confused by this, but grasped his katana even harder and said, who are you? And how do you know my name? Crow then chuckled and said while holding out his hand, I'm Crow and I would like to train you for a while. How I know you is because of Tsukasa Kadoya. You see, I made him a deal. If I train you in mastering a side then I will return to my original world beside my surprisingly amazing in-bed wife. Naruto quickly nodded and said so, the man who changed my life wanted to help me more, huh? Crow nodded and said I believe so. However, I don't think he sent only me. I think he made more deals with more guys to train you. Yet again, Naruto nodded and bowed to his new temporary master. He then said teach me everything about the scythe, Crow-sensei. Crow was shocked by the boy's action and thought wow, this boy reminds me of Ruby when I started training her. Ruby, oh how much would I like to see you now. I hope I get to see you soon. Crow then said well, get ready for the craziest training you will ever receive, boy. Naruto then rose up and nodded in glee. Crow then said okay, first of all, you will need to have a sit, but a number of footprints interrupted him. Crow then quickly turned around to see three men. One man wore long white robes with a red sash and a white hood. He also wore leather armor and sheaths to store his weaponry and pouches. While another man wore a white karate gi with a red headband wrapped around his forehead. He also had a red belt around his waist. The final man's armor is primarily black and gray, with goldenrod greaves and gauntlets. He wears a matching goldenrod mask with a black area that obscures the right half of his face, including a missing eye. He wears a utility belt with pouches and sheaths for a sword and rifle on his back. The man in the hood raised his hands in the air and said, "I'm Alter, I'm supposed to train Naruto in the teachings of the assassins and assassination techniques." Then, the man in the karate gi said, "I'm Ryu, I'm here to train Naruto in mastering Ansatsuken." The final man then said, "I'm Slade Wilson, but call me Deathstroke. I'll be training Naruto on how to use weapons in different fields." With that, Crow nodded and said, "All of you met Tsukasa Kadoya and made a deal with him, haven't you?" All three men quickly nodded in response, and then Alter said, "I made a deal with him to help Naruto in fighting. In return, Naruto will gain freedom, and I will gain the ability to meet with my descendants." Ryu then said, "I made a deal with that man so that I can finally break free from the Satsui no Hado." Deathstroke then said, "I made a deal so that I can get out of the life of a mercenary." With that, Crow nodded and said, "I think he made deals with us to help this boy to become strong." Naruto simply stared at all of the men and said, "So, all four of you are willing to train me? I mean, even thought I've been trained by 5 different senseis. Getting 4 more is well awesome, I guess." With that, all 4 men laughed at the boy's words. Suddenly, their stomach grumbled. Crow then said, "Do you know any good place to eat? Cause, I believe it's dinner time." Naruto then quickly gave them a smile. A few minutes later, Naruto simply brought them to Haichu's tea shop since he knows that they serve dinner. Since most of them weren't used to the food in this world, Naruto decided to order them some turkey sandwich with croissants as bread. The results were Crow and Ryu ordering more of them, while Alter and Deathstroke sided the bill. Naruto laughed at their antics, and Levi then asked him about who they were. Which Naruto replied, "Levi-sensei, they are my new senseis, Crow, Alter, Ryu and Deathstroke. They will be teaching me non-shinobi fighting skills." With that, Levi nodded in understanding. Shadow then asked Naruto, "How did they get here, Naruto?" Naruto then said, "Remember Tsukasa Kadoya, well, he wanted to help me get stronger by giving me more masters." Shadow then nodded and went up to the 4 men. He then said, "I hope you'll be teaching Naruto well. Can I get assurance?" With that, all 4 men nodded. Alter then asked, "I was wondering, can we live here temporarily? I mean, with Naruto's multiple Gokubushins, he can learn from us in a few days." Shadow then thought about it and turned to Levi for an answer, which Levi just nodded. With that, the shop turned into a place to loiter between 9 grown men. Naruto sighed and saw that the sky was getting dark. Naruto then quickly said bye to his senseis and Goku Shunshin to his room. As Naruto got there, he was surprised to see that a book that he never read before was on his study table. Naruto then quickly grabbed the book and looked at the title of it and who wrote it. The book was entitled The Journey Through the Decades by Tsukasa Kadoya, which interested him. He then realized that a note was attached on the back of the novel. Naruto quickly picked it out and read it. "Dear Naruto. This is Tsukasa Kadoya, the man who changed your life. Anyways, I gave you this book as a congratulations gift. Hope you like it because my adopted son and my biological one highly recommend it to anyone. Also, spoiler alert, in one of the chapters might involve a doll in a white dress with a creepy smile. So, if you don't like horror based on real life events, then don't read it. Also, hope you enjoy your new senseis. Sincerely. Sekai no Hakeshi. P.S. You may or may not get a talking right hand soon." Naruto couldn't help but to tear up and cried at how thoughtful of the man who changed his life. He then wiped his tears and lied on his bed. He then decided to give the book a read as he placed his katanas under his bed. The next day, Naruto woke up and quickly got himself prepared for the academy. He took a nice shower, put on his normal shinobi clothes, sharpened his katanas, and went downstairs to be greeted by the sight of his mother. Kushina looked at her son and said, "Naruto, come down and have some breakfast with us. You can't go to the academy with an empty stomach." Naruto was simply confused by all of this, but obliged and went downstairs to have some breakfast with his family members. As Naruto got to the dining table, he was greeted by the sight of his family getting ready to eat. Naruto then decided to just sit in between his father and Natsumi. Naruto then greeted his family members in a low but confused tone and grabbed some eggs to eat, which caused everyone except for Menma to flinch. As he finished eating, he then decided to grab his plate to the sink and was stopped by his mother, who said, "It's okay Naruto, I'll do it for you." However, Naruto shook his head and said, "No Kasama, I don't want to be a burden to the family." Which yet again caused everyone except for Menma to flinch. With that, Naruto washed his own plate and went to sit in the living room to practice Ninjutsu. He quickly grabbed a blank sheet and a brush to make some seals. He was planning to make a seal that can increase one's attributes during a fight. As he was making it, Minato noticed that this was a chance to reconcile with his son and then walked towards him. He then checked what kind of seal was Naruto doing and saw that he could use a little help. With that, Minato went up to his son and asked, "Hey Naruto, what kind of seal are you trying to make?" Naruto looked up at his father and said, "You see, I wanted to make a seal that increases one's attributes. But I keep getting a character wrong." Minato nodded and said, "I think you should stroke it a bit softer in this character and stroke it a little harder in that character." With that, Naruto's face brightened up and did what Minato told him to do. As he finished, Minato looked at it and was surprised at how good Naruto was in Fuinjutsu. Minato then gave his son a smile, and for once Naruto returned a genuine smile, not that kind of smile that is cold or stuff like that. Unknown to him, Naruto was unsure why he gave his father a genuine smile, but maybe just for once. He then looked at the time to see it read 8:20. With that he said bye. And disappeared in Gokushunshin. This caused Minato to smile while thinking, "Naruto, I will become a better father towards you from now on." Chapter 4. A few minutes later. Naruto is now seen entering his class to be greeted by the scene of his classmates chatting with each other. But by the time he got in, everyone in the class stared at him. Naruto simply shrugged of the stares from his classmates and walked towards his usual seat next to Hinata. He then said in a cheerful tone, "Heyo, Haim." Which Hinata replied with a blush and in a shy tone, "Oh how are you, and then Naruto-kun." With that, Naruto gave her his foxy smile and caressed her right hand with his left. Sasuke, who was sitting right in front of him, turned around and said, "Hey Naruto, I have a feeling that we might be in a team of 5 just like the Gownins." Naruto turned toward Sasuke and nodded. Hinata then said, Naruto-kun, how is your relationship with your family?" Naruto then sighed and said, "Not too good. But lately, my father has been giving me some pointers in Fuinjutsu, which I guess my relationship with my dad is getting better." With that, Hinata smiled and thought at least someone has been trying to reconcile with Naruto. Naruto then said to Hinata and Sakura, "Guys, last night I had a weird dream, or was it? I'm not too sure. And this is how it goes." Flashback. Last night. Naruto was reading chapter 32 of the Journey Through the Decades and was enthralled by it. The chapter was about Tsukasa Kadoya, his half-brother Levi Ackerman Kadoya, Kaido Daiki, Yusuke Nadera, his wife Natsumi Hikari, and Naruto Kadoya, journeying to a world where mankind are in constant fear of an alien race called Kasiju, also known as parasites. As Naruto was about to get into an action scene, he heard a slithering sound and saw a tiny snake-like creature on his dresser. With that, Naruto placed his book down and tried to whip it away, but the creature dodged it and inserted itself into the back of his wrist. Naruto then panicked and grabbed a large rope that was beside his bed. He then quickly wrapped it around his bicep before it could get any further. A few seconds later, he felt that the creature stopped moving and Naruto relaxed. He then yawned for a bit, lied down on his bed and went to sleep. End of flashback. And that's how it went. I'm seriously not too sure what it was. But the dream must have meant something. With that, Naruto finished his story. But unknown to him, his right hand was fidgeting with Senshi's hilt by itself. Sasuke and Hinata then looked at each other while thinking what the dream could. But unknown to them, Shikamaru, who was sitting right beside Naruto, had heard everything and said, "Maybe it wasn't a dream, Naruto. Maybe it meant that you were given a power that no one in this world has never seen before. I mean, that Tsukasa Kadoya must have given you another gift. But that's too damn troublesome to think about." With that, all of Naruto's friends and girlfriend nodded, including Choji, who was sitting next to Shikamaru, and Shino, who was sitting next to Sasuke. Naruto then nodded as well and said with a smirk, "Troublesome indeed." Naruto then decided to rest his head on his arms and went to sleep while waiting for Iruka to come in. A few minutes later, Iruka came in and said, "Alright class, time for your team placements." Iruka then turned quiet and sighed while thinking, why is Naruto sleeping right now? With that, Iruka took a random piece of chalk from his right pocket and threw it towards Naruto. But what shocked everyone was that Naruto caught it with his right hand while still sleeping. With that, everyone shouted in their minds, "Nani? How did Naruto Nai-chan, the loser Naruto-kun, do that?" Naruto then woke up in confusion by two things. 1. Why was he suddenly holding a piece of chalk? 2. Why was everyone looking at him with shock? Iruka then shook himself from shock and said, "Nice reflexes, Naruto. It was as if your right hand was another being." Naruto simply nodded in confusion and placed a piece of chalk on the table. Iruka then cleared his throat and said, "Alright now, time for the team placements. Team 1 will consist of," but Naruto's mind was completely blank by the time Iruka announced it. He was thinking why he woke up with a piece of chalk in his right hand and why was it caressing Senshi's hilt as if it was precious. Naruto then decided to pay attention to Iruka when the Chunin said Team 7 will consist of Menma, Natsumi and Mito Namikaze, with Kakashi Hatake as their sensei. With that, Menma turned his head towards Naruto with an arrogant smirk, which Naruto didn't pay much attention to him as he was looking at Iruka with tremendous focus. Meanwhile, Natsumi and Mito looked at each other and sighed while thinking of the same thing, we didn't get to be in the same team with Aniki. Now, how are we going to reconcile with him? Iruka then continued, announcing teammate will consist of Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburam and Hinata Hyuga, with Kurina Yuhi as their sensei. With that, Naruto and Hinata sighed and thought I didn't get to be in a team with Haim Naruto-kun. Well, Kiba just wasn't sure if he was happy that he has good teammates, but one wrong move with Hinata can cause him to wake up in a bathtub filled with blood that was dripping from his left kidney area. With that, Kiba shivered and so did Akamaru, who thought of the same thing. Meanwhile, Shino just sat there not thinking of anything. Iruka then said Team 9 is still active, while Team 10 will consist of Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi, with Asuma Sarutobi as their sensei. With that, Ino cried inwardly while Shikamaru thought it was too troublesome to think about it and Choji just continued on munching his chips. Menma then smirked and shouted, so the loser doesn't get a team, huh Iruka-sensei? Iruka shook his head and said no, however Team 11 will consist of Sasuke Uchiha, Sai, Yakumo Kurama, Sakura Haruno and Naruto Namikaze, with Anko Mitarashi and Raito Haddock as their joint sensei because of too many students. By the mention of Raito, Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other and high-fived. While Sakura blushed that she was being in a team with Sasuke, while Sai and Yakumo just nodded that they were being in a great team. Iruka then said wow, all 5 of you might just become the next Gownins. With that, everyone except for Naruto and the gang had confused looks on their faces. Natsumi then raised her hand and said Iruka-sensei, who are the Gownins? I mean, you've never once mentioned about them before. As Iruka was about to answer, Naruto answered the Gownins were a group of 5 well-known ninjas who were considered SSS rank. One of them was known as Haichu in the bingo books for his great leadership and strict behavior. He was known to use a weird but effective dual kinjutsu style, known as the Haichu dual kinjutsu technique. Only he and another mastered it. Then, there's the Taijutsu expert known as the Taijutsu no-O in the bingo books for his crazy strength and flamboyant fighting style. He was known to use a fighting style known as the Killer Strong style. Yet again, only he and another mastered it. Next, there's the ninjutsu expert known as the Go no Sasori for his amazing accuracy in throwing a kunai and his bloodline. He was the last of his clan named the Shirai Ryu. Yet again, only he and another mastered the clan's hidden jutsu. Fourthly, there's the Kinjutsu expert known as the Shiroi Asha for his unpredictability fighting style and being able to kill men with a wooden sword named Lake Toba that can cut through almost everything. He was a master of his own Kinjutsu style. Yet again, only he and another has mastered the style. Finally, there's the Fuinjutsu expert and arguably the strongest of the 5, known as the Kaikyoku no Ninja for his abilities in disappearing at will and stopping space and time with a jutsu. He was known to have a Dojutsu bloodline called the Kontongan. Yet again only he and another mastered his Fuinjutsu style. The names are as follows, Levi Ackerman, Shinsuke Nakamura, Hanzo Hasashi, Gintoki Sakata and Shadow only Shadow. Does that answer your question, Emaudo? With that, everyone except for his friends and girlfriends since they've met, said men were shocked by what Naruto was talking about. Iruka then clapped and said wow Naruto, even I am a bit misinformed about them. Anyways, today is the day that all of you are genins of this village where all of you are branded as adults and you will find many hardships as the life of the shinobi is not an easy life. As this is your last teachings from me, may the will of fire burn inside of you and never forget your goals. Now, we'll be having lunch and you will come back here to wait for your senseis. With that, everyone nodded and got out of the classroom. Naruto and Sasuke went to find their teammates who were right outside of the class. As they met their teammates, Naruto said alright my new teammates, let's have lunch at a place that only a few people know. With this, we can get to know each other better. How about that? By the way, it'll be my treat. With that, Sai and Yakumo nodded while Sakura said Naruto, I'm sorry that I've been a bitch toward you. I was just wanting to see how long will you put on that idiotic mask of yours. Can you find it in your heart to forgive me? Naruto simply nodded and said with a teasing smirk sure, and I'm pretty sure that Sasuke would like to ask you out. With that, Sasuke blushed and tried to close the blonde's mouth. But Sakura heard everything and blushed while saying to Sasuke wait, you have the same feelings towards me too. Sasuke simply let go of Naruto's mouth, scratched the back of his neck while smiling sheepishly and said yeah, I guess. But please let go of your fangirlish attitude. You will bring a bad name towards Kunoichis and you'll never get a date with me ever again. With that, Sakura tilted her head in confusion and said wait, what do you mean again? Sasuke then blushed and said after we meet up with our senseis, I would like to ask you out to the same place where we'll be eating soon. Sakura then simply nodded in glee as her longtime crush has finally accepted her feelings and vice versa. Both of them stayed there in silence for a while up until Naruto snapped his fingers and said guys, come on let's go. With that, Sasuke and Sakura went to catch up with their other teammates. Haichu's tea shop. As they arrived, Sai asked, "Hey Naruto-san, I was wondering. How did you find out about this place?" Naruto simply said in half-truth, "Don't give me any honorables please next time. How I find out was by simply one day I got super hungry and I had like only 60 ryo with me. Then, I found this shop and they serve food and drinks for reasonable prices. With that, I became their #1 customer." Naruto then gestured his new friends and Sasuke into the shop and what they found was absolutely astonishing. For a shop that looked nothing much from the outside, it was completely different in the inside. It was as if a clean freak owned this place. Because the store was clean and the floor actually showed a reflection of their faces. The store had soothing blue walls and ceiling, a wooden floor and bunch of tables. The shop wasn't crowded today since it was a pretty well-known restaurant. It also had Blaze as the receptionist. Naruto then walked up to Blaze and said, "Blaze-san, a table for 5 please." With that, Blaze nodded and said, "Very well Naruto-kun, also who are your new friends?" Naruto simply gave her his foxy smile and said, "They're my new teammates, Sai, Sakura Haruno and Yakumo Kurama. You already know Sasuke right?" Blaze simply nodded and kindly shot a thumb towards a nicely black-colored table with 6 black chairs. With that, Naruto nodded and walked towards the table with his friends following behind. As they sat down, Shinsu came out with 6 menus, gave them 1 each, and said, "Hi, I'm Dean Ambrose, and I'll be your waiter for today. Now, what would you like to order?" Naruto then said, "I'll be having the usual, Dean-san. How about you guys?" With that, Shinsu jotted it down on a notepad and said, "Ramen with mushroom broth and some chicken bits, right?" "Alright Naruto-kun." Yakumo then asked Naruto, Naruto, I am totally unfamiliar with most of these foods. What is a stew?" Naruto nodded in understanding and replied, "It's like a soup only with more gravy and it smells delicious." With that, Yakumo told Shinsuke that she would like to have a bowl of beef stew. Sai then ordered a meatball sub which it sounded interesting to him, while Sasuke and Sakura ordered the same thing, a plate of beef tacos or whatever it was. Shinsuke simply nodded and jotted all of the orders down. Naruto then ordered, "Dean-san, the drinks will be a pot of haichu surprise. If you don't mind." Shinsuke then smiled and said, "Excellent choice coming from our #1 customer. Is that all?" Naruto simply nodded as Shinsuke grabbed the menus. He then asked Sai and Yakumo, "Hey Sai, Yakumo, I was wondering what are your best fields of techniques? Since, I've grown quite accustomed to Sasuke and Sakura's abilities." Yakumo was the one to answer first. "I'm best in the Ninjutsu field as I was Kurenai Yuhi's apprentice for a short while." Naruto simply nodded and then looked at Sai who answered, "I'm good in art ninjutsu as I am very fond of drawing really." With that, Naruto nodded and said, "Well, we will be one hell of a team in the battlefield. That's all I can say." Then, they sat there sharing funny stories. All of it was funny and all but Naruto's took the cake. It involved him, Raito, a camera, a certain orange book and an angry Shizune. When Naruto told his, everyone else laughed until they hurt their stomachs. As they finished laughing, their food arrived and when Shinsuke served the haichu surprise, it was definitely a surprise to all of them. The drink was a blackish red liquid with little bubble-like jelly in the bottom. As they got a glass each, Shinsuke poured all 6 of them the drink equally. With that, Naruto said "Itadikamasu," with his friends following his example. As his friends took a bite of their respective food, they felt a massive explosion of flavors. Time skip. As they finished their food, Naruto raised his hand towards Shinsuke and asked for the bill. As Shinsuke nodded, Levi came out of nowhere and said, "Don't need Naruto-kun, this is your 100th time eating in this restaurant. So, today will be on the house." With that, Naruto nodded while the girls drooled at the sight of Levi, but Sakura then said sorry to Sasuke who said, "It's okay Sakura, Eren-san is really good looking." Naruto then got up and said, "Alright guys, time to get back to the academy. Let's go." With that, everyone nodded and left the restaurant. Levi then thought, a team of 5A. Haha, reminds me of when I was placed in a team with the guys. Academy. As Naruto and the others got there, only Team 7 was there and Naruto knew the reason why. Kakashi's late again. With that, Naruto and the others went to sit down at the back of the class while waiting for their senseis to arrive. A few minutes later, the door opened and the members of Team 7 were expecting Kakashi, but instead, it was a purple-haired, brown pupilless-eyed woman in a brown trench coat with a fishnet top, a orange skirt, and the other was a white-haired, blue-eyed boy with gravity-defying hair and a grey top and pants. He was also wearing black fingerless gauntlets from his fists to his elbows. This were Anko Mitarashi and Raito Haddock. Anko then said, "Team 11 meet us near the Forest of Death in 30 minutes, or else that'll be for me to know and for you to find out he." Well, Raito shook his head in embarrassment. After all, he was a 15-year-old Jounin. With that, both Jounins disappeared in a shunshin and all members of Team 11 got up and started running towards the door. While Naruto was running for the door, Natsumi and Mito tried to call out to him but failed. 29 minutes and 59 seconds later. Naruto and the others arrived at the gates of the Forest of Death just in time, which Anko sighed and said, "Oh, why didn't you just appear late on purpose? That would have been fun." Well, Raito facepalmed and said, "Anko-senpai, we have a job to do. So please. Anyways, tell us your name, likes, dislikes and dream." Sakura then raised her hand and said, "Why don't both of you start first as an example?" But that, Raito and Anko nodded. Anko then said, "Very well, I'm Anko Mitarashi. My likes are dango, training with my sensei Orochimaru, working in the tea department and hanging out with my friends, Kunai and Yugao. My dislikes are perverts, rapists and people who thinks that dango is bad. My dream is, well, I would like to be together with the perfect man and probably have a child together." Anko then pointed towards Raito and said, "Your turn, Raito." Raito sighed and said, "My name is Raito Haddock. My likes are my family, training Naruto, books, cooking and Kinjutsu fights. My dislikes are the books that my father reads, why he reads them and what he does after reading them. My dream is, well, to get together with a nice girl, doesn't have to be too pretty, and probably start my own family." Naruto then spoke up, "But Raito-sensei, your parents had you when they were 19. Are you saying you want to do that early?" But that, everyone else except for Raito, who blushed in embarrassment, laughed at what Naruto said. A few seconds later, Anko wiped a tear from her eye and pointed towards Sai, "Well, saying you with the odd clothes, tell us your name, likes, dislikes and dreams." But that, Sai gave her his infamous fake smile and said, "My name is Sai. My likes are practicing my art ninjutsu and this meatball sub I just had a few minutes ago. My dislikes is that I don't really have one. My dream is, well, I don't really have one yet." Everyone else sweat dropped while thinking we only know his name and likes. Anko then nodded and pointed towards Yakumo and said, "Your turn, girl in the pink kimono." The brunette then nodded and said, "I'm Yakumo Kurama. My likes are perfecting my Jinjutsu techniques and this beef stew I just had a few minutes ago. My dislikes are perverts and rapists. My dream is probably becoming a great ninja and to surpass Kurenai-sensei in Jinjutsu." But that, Raito and Anko nodded in understanding. Then, it was Raito's turn to point toward Sakura and said, "Your turn, pink-haired." Sakura nodded and said, "I'm Sakura Haruno. My likes are, well, Sasuke and probably training together with my friends. My dislikes are, well, it used to be Ino, but now I think I dislike fangirls since it has given kunoichis a bad name and perverts. My dream is to probably become a great ninja and have a family with Sasuke." Sasuke simply blushed when he heard his name and family were in a sentence together. Well, Raito and Anko thought the same thing. Wait, what? The records say that Sakura was a fangirl herself, but now? I'm not too sure. Raito then pointed towards Sasuke and said, "Uchiha, your turn." With that, Sasuke nodded and said, "I'm Sasuke Uchiha. My likes are Sakura, training with my friends, my family and a certain manga called Bleach. My dislikes are people who say that one is monster even though they know that they are monsters themselves. My dream is to become the clan head of the Uchihas, beat my brother for the title, and kill a certain traitor." But that, Raito gulped as he knew Shisui well. He still didn't understood why he turned his back towards Konoha. Anko then nodded and pointed towards Naruto, whose right hand was acting crazy. Anko then had a confused look but said, "Your turn, Blondie." Naruto nodded and pushed his right hand down while saying, "I'm Naruto Namikaze. My likes are training with my other senseis, Raito-sensei and Kakashi-sensei, Tsukasa Kadoya's thoughtfulness, my sword senshi and Kyofu no Ken, and finally, well, my dad is not too bad, I guess. My dislikes are perverts, rapists and my other family members except for my dad. My dream is to make my own clan and surpass my other senseis in their fields." With that, Raito nodded in understanding while Anko looked at Naruto with confusion. Raito then cleared his throat and said, "Tomorrow at 8 in the morning, you will meet us here and have your true genin test." Sakura then tried to raise her arm to ask a question, but Sasuke placed it down and whispered what is meant. With that, Sakura nodded and left it at that. Raito then nodded and Anko said, "Alright, go home now." With that, everyone left separate ways except for Sakura and Sasuke, who were holding hands while walking. Namikaze compound. Naruto reached the Namikaze compound at around 3:45 in the evening and was wondering if his mother was willing to teach him some Suiton jutsus because it turns out that Naruto had a water affinity. With that, Naruto gulped and went into the house. He then announced "Tadaima," which was answered by Kushina Akari. Naruto then placed his shinobi sandals into the shoe rack and stepped foot into the house. As he walked in, his mother walked up to him and said, "Naruto, who did you get as your senseis? I would really like to know." Naruto nodded and said, "I have Anko and Raito Naichin as my sensei, Kasama." Kushina simply brightened up as Naruto finally started to be less cold towards her. Naruto then asked Kasama, "I've been meaning to ask. Could you teach me some Suiton jutsu? Because I don't really know anyone who's good in Suiton jutsus except you, and it's also because that I have a strong water affinity." Kushina quickly nodded and said sure, on one condition. Don't use them on your comrades. Now, come on to the training ground. I'll be there in a sec. Naruto nodded and walked towards the personal training ground of the Namikazes. It wasn't too big or wasn't too small. It had trees to practice tree walking and a large pond to practice suitin jutsus and water walking. Naruto then placed his katanas onto the ground and waited for his mother to appear. A few seconds later, Kushina in her shinobi clothes appeared in a shunshin and said to her son alright, now what would you like to start with? Naruto already knew what he wanted to learn and said the Suryuiden no Jutsu, please. With that, Kushina nodded and said very well, repeat my hand seals after me. Naruto then nodded and copied his mother's hand seals. The moment he finished doing all of them, Naruto shouted Suitin, Suryuiden no Jutsu. Suddenly, a giant water dragon appeared from the lake and dispersed a few seconds later. With that, Kushina clapped her hands at her son's achievement but also shocked that her son was a prodigy. She then said, that's amazing, Sachi. You really do deserve the Rookie of the Year title. Naruto then gave her a genuine smile and said I guess so. I mean, I'm not that good really. Kushina nodded and suddenly saw Naruto's katanas. She then asked say Naruto, where did you get those katanas? Naruto then grabbed his katanas and placed them in a sash that was wrapped around his waist. He then said do you by any chance know of a man named Tsukasa Kadoya? Which Kushina nodded in response. Naruto then said he gave them to me on my 7th birthday after the moment my birthright was taken away from me. Kushina then flinched and said Sachi, I'm really sorry. Naruto shook his head while smiling and said it's okay, Kasama. If my birthright wasn't taken from me, then I would never have met my senseis. With that, Kushina smiled back and asked I have to ask you something. Who are your senseis other than Raito and Anko? I kinda need to know and also, why is there an eye on your right hand? Naruto looked at her confused and looked at his right hand to see that there was 2 eyes and mouth on his said hand. With that, the sudden creature began to speak hi Naruto and his mother, I'm what is known as a Kasiju I believe. You can call me Migi since I am your right hand now basically. Naruto and Kushina looked at the parasite with confusion. Kushina silently tried to take out a kunai from her pouch but was stopped by the parasite who said don't. If you kill me, then your son will not have a right hand anymore, thus not being able to become a ninja anymore. Do you want that? Since you've just reconciled with him just a few seconds ago. With that, Kushina sighed and placed her kunai back into her pouch. She then said why are you here, Migi? Migi then turned into a cuter version of himself and said I was tasked by Tsukasa Kadoya to become a companion of your son. Anyways, Naruto just tell her about your senseis already. With that, Naruto sighed in defeat and said Kasama, don't freak out, but the Gownins are still alive and yes, they are my senseis. Kushina simply jaw-dropped and said wait, so Levi is still alive then? Naruto nodded and said however, he doesn't want to see any of you yet after you've neglected me. Anyways, thank you Kasama for teaching me a suitin jutsu. I may need it in the future. Naruto then looked at Migi and said don't do that ever again, Migi. Migi simply responded in a nodding motion and went into sleep, thus having Naruto his right hand back. Naruto then turned to his mother and said Kasama, I have to go out for a while now. I will explain how I may have gotten this Kasiju after dinner. Kushina nodded and Naruto disappeared in a Goku Shunshin. The same training ground where Naruto met his senseis. As Naruto got to the spot, he saw his new senseis were already waiting for him with new weapons and equipment for his training. Alter then said okay Naruto, put on all of this equipment including the wristbands and then make as many clones as you want. So that, we can finish your training. With that, Naruto quickly put on the equipment and did a hand seal while shouting Gokubushin no Jutsu. Suddenly, 555 Naruto clones appeared and started their training. 30 minutes later, all of the clones completed their training. Like all of it. Because, they did it so quick that they kept asking for more. With that, all 4 men disappeared in a flash of light but not before congratulating Naruto. Remnant. Crow woke up in an open coffin. When he got up, he heard crying from Ruby, Yang and many more including Ironwood. He also heard his wife giving a speech saying he may be a drunk. But, he was my drunk and the father of my child. Crow, please if you could just suddenly come back to life. Crow then decided it was showtime and dramatically raised his hand as if he was returning as a zombie. He then got up and said hey honey, why am I in a coffin? With that, Crow Branwyn was slapped and kissed by the most beautiful woman in his life while creating a miracle in remnant history. Chapter 5. A few seconds later. To say that Naruto was confused why his new senseis disappeared was a complete understatement. He was simply baffled for a few seconds but then realized that they have already done their part of the deal. With that, Naruto shrugged and tried out his customized sword with a clockwork mechanism of indeterminate nature built into the space above the hilt and a pair of parallel handguards is set beneath. The sword could also take a form of a scythe by pressing a button. This was given by Crow since Crow was the one who taught him, or rather his clones, how to use a scythe. With the memory feedback given by his clones, Naruto quickly slice open several dummies with a single strike. With that, Naruto smiled and looked at his new weapon while saying, I should name you Death Stalker and I should probably keep you in a storage scroll. With that, Naruto decided to take out an empty storage scroll and place Death Stalker into it. Thus, the Death Stalker was transported into the pocket dimension until Naruto would like to use it again. Naruto then tried out the hidden blades, as Alter would call it, by jumping onto a random dummy and stabbed it in the temple area. As he retracted his blade out, the stuffings from the temple area of the dummy started to come out and all it left was an unstuffed dummy head. With that, Naruto was yet again impressed by its design, uses and advantages. Naruto then thought, I should probably put both of you in the same storage scroll as well. Naruto then removed the hidden blades and placed them into the same storage scroll. With that, his hidden blades went into the pocket dimension as well. Naruto then put his left hand onto the back of his shoulder to feel a gun handle. With that, he brought it forwards while placing his index finger on the trigger. He then realized that it was a rifle sniper as it had a scope on it. He then smirked as he looked up and saw a bird flying. With that, Naruto decided to aim his sniper rifle towards the bird, placed his left eye onto the scope and pulled the trigger. As the bullet flew, a gunshot was heard and the bullet pierced through the bird. Naruto just couldn't help but to smirk at his new weapon and his new abilities. Not only has his eyesight got better with the help of the eagle vision, he also realized that he wanted to shoot powerful projectiles from his hands towards random people while shouting Hadouken. He did exactly that after storing his sniper into a storage scroll as he felt a sudden pulse from both of his katanas. With that, Naruto sensed jealousy coming from Kyofu no Ken and Senshi, but more to Kyofu no Ken. Naruto then decided to look up to the sun setting, which meant he needed to get home. With that, Naruto did a hand seal and Gokubushin into his house. Namikaze compound. As he got there, he was greeted by the shock look given by his mother, but then turned into a sour look and said, Naruto, next time do it outside the house. Because, you left scorch marks on the 6000 Ryo carpet. With that, Naruto realized his mistake and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly while saying, Gomen Kasama, I forgot that the Gokushunshin leaves those kind of marks. Kushina simply shook her head and said, it's alright, I hated that carpet anyways. Also, can you explain about Migi? Naruto nodded and shook Migi awake. As Migi woke up, Minato walked into the living room while saying, Tadai Naruto, why does your right hand have an eyeball? Naruto looked at his father with an embarrassed smile and said, it's a long story, so it goes like this, adds flashback in chapter 3, and that's how I got Migi, I think. Minato couldn't believe it, but when he saw Migi nodding to the explanation, he shrugged and said, if the council know about this, then they will try to take it away from you, regardless. In response, Migi did a shaking head gesture and said, that cannot be done. You see Hokage-sama, once my kind is with a hoster body, I am attached to him or her until he or she dies. So by trying to mass produce, I will die instantly. Minato and Kushina then nodded in understanding. Migi then looked at Naruto and said, I'm tired, I need to sleep. With that, Naruto regained his right hand control back and said in a low tone, don't tell this to any of my siblings yet. I don't want any of them, or more specifically Menma, to gossip about it. Minato, not wanting to be treated coldly by his son, simply nodded, and so did Kushina. With that, it went totally quiet for a few seconds up until Kushina said, anyways Naruto, we can't have dinner yet since your siblings are not here and I haven't prepared dinner yet. So you can tell us about your training with your other senseis. Minato then looked at Kushina with a weird look but obliged and decided to listen to what Naruto would say, while thinking that it wouldn't blow his mind. Oh, how wrong he was. 20 minutes later. Minato looked at his son with disbelief as the young lad had finished his story. He then managed to stutter some words, so oh wait, LL Levi II is still alive. Naruto simply nodded in response and said, however, he's not willing to see you yet. After what you did, he doesn't want to see any of you. With that, both parents flinched at the same time. As Minato was about to say something, Naruto shook his head and said, it's okay, I don't hate any of you really. You're still my family after all. I mean, Kasama was the one who had to go through hell and came back to Earth just to give birth to all four of us. Minato and Kushina looked at each other while having relieved looks on each on their faces. Suddenly, the door opened to reveal Menma, Mito and Natsumi while announcing in unison Tadama. Which Minato and Kushina said in response to Carry. As the children went in, they except for Menma were shocked to see Naruto waving at them while saying yo. With that, both sisters ran up to him and hugged him in unison to the ground while saying Naruto and Ikki, forgive us. Which Naruto replied with a chuckle and ruffled both of their heads while saying it's alright, Imautos. I'm great. He then gently removed their hands and walked towards his dumbfounded brother. He then held out his hand and said, Hayatato, how about this? If you beat me in any fight we both agree on, then I will stay out of your way in becoming the next Hokage. However, if I beat you in any fight we both agree on, then you will stop calling a loser. How about it? With that, Menma was unsure why his brother was still talking to him. A few seconds later, he then shook the hand and nodded while saying deal. Naruto then smiled, let go of the hand and announced, I'll be making dinner tonight, if you don't mind. Kushina was about to protest, but Minato shook his head towards her and gave her a look that said, I'm interested in what he'll be making. Just let him do it. With that, Kushina nodded and let Naruto cook any dish he would like. Naruto then simply nodded and walked to the kitchen to cook while his family observed. They saw him making dough, put some toppings on it with cheese and placed it into the oven. A few minutes of waiting, Naruto came out with a giant wooden plate that was carrying a circle with pepperoni, cheese and sauce as its toppings. Naruto then prepared the food onto the dining table. With the help of his Gokubushins, he was able to prepare a pot of tea, some rice, a bowl of grilled chicken and a bowl of salad. He then dispelled his clones and did the finishing touches of the food. Thus, shocking everyone in the house while inwardly shouting Nani. Naruto then looked towards his family members and gave them a smile while saying dinner is served. Please enjoy. With that, everyone took each of their seats and digged in. By the time Natsumi tried a slice of the circle, she was in bliss and said to her eldest brother Naniki, what do you call the circle? It's the best food I've ever tasted, well after ramen of course. Naruto simply smiled and said it's called a pizza. A dish one of my senseis taught me while I was training with him one day. He then looked at Menma who was enjoying every dish Naruto made. With that, Naruto said, so Menma, how's my cooking? Menma was not too sure whether to belittle Naruto or praise him because it was really good, but it was made by his loser brother. With that, Menma blushed in embarrassment while saying in a low tone, it's not bad, I guess. Which received laughter from everyone in the dining room. A few minutes later. Naruto sighed as he sat on his bed of his room while observing Migi who was reading random books. Naruto then said, what are you doing now, Migi? Migi then turned towards Naruto and said, finding information about chakra and the shinobi world. Naruto shook his head and asked, well, what have you found out? Migi then said with no emotion in his voice, I've learned about Jinchuricus, which means a sacrifice for a human being to seal a powerful tailed beast or demon inside of them. Naruto nodded and said, yes, that happens to be all three of my siblings. Migi shook his head or rather hand and said, what do you mean three? You're a Jinchuriki as well. Naruto looked at Migi with a confused look and said, what do you mean, I'm a Jinchuriki? I don't contain the Kyuubi's energy inside of me or its soul. Migi then did a thinking pose and said, how do I say this? When I came into your body just to invade your brain, something or rather someone inside of you stopped me from doing so. He had 3 eyes and he was short. He also had black spiky hair with white streaks. He was also wearing a black long-sleeved shirt with black pants. By the time, I thought there was only one being. But I was wrong, it turns out that you have 2 souls sealed into you. One of them, the man who I was referring to, was definitely a demon. Then, there was another person who looks around your age. He had spiky silver hair, very pale skin and blue eyes. He also wears baggy clothing, with his attire consisting of long-sleeved and dark-colored shirts. He also was wearing baggy shorts. However, this man is definitely not a demon. Naruto looked at Migi surprised and asked, if so, where is my seal mark? Migi then extended himself towards Naruto's back and gently touched the boy's neck. As Migi touched Naruto's neck, Naruto felt a sudden surge of electricity. With that, Naruto said, alright Migi, that's enough. I need to go to bed. I have an important date tomorrow. Migi nodded and Naruto lied on the bed while placing the back of his left arm onto his eyes. He then closed his eyes and went to sleep. Mindscape. Naruto suddenly woke up in a sewer and thought, what am I doing in a sewer? He then picked himself up and walked towards a random opening. As he got in, he saw a giant cage that revealed 2 men just like what Migi described to him about. With that, he spoke up, who are you guys? In response, one of the man who was wearing black said, so it seems that our jailer has visited us, Killua. The other man who was identified as Killua simply nodded and said, definitely hi. Naruto was simply dumbfounded and said, wait, am I both of your vessels? Which the man who identified himself as Hai simply nodded in response. Killua then continued, you see, we were transported here by a certain man but was interrupted by Naruto who said named Tsukasa Kadoya, right? Hai then nodded and so did Killua. Killua then said also, he asked us to train you with some of our powers but was interrupted by Hai who said which we agreed on rather quickly. Naruto then shook his head while saying this Tsukasa Kadoya is really starting to annoy me. I mean he gave me a talking right hand. Unknown to him, Migi had awoken in the mindscape and said, what do you mean? He's just really trying to help you. Which frightened Naruto who said while looking at Migi directly, why are you in my mindscape? Migi then said I'm a part of you. So, it's definitely normal. Naruto simply sighed in defeat while Killua came up to the boy and said you do realize that you're our Jinchuriki. Right. Naruto couldn't came up with any answer, so he just nodded. Hiei then got closer to the boy and said Naruto, I will teach you every single technique that I know of, and so will Killua. Killua simply nodded and said yes, but however, you won't train with us until you pass that true genin test. Naruto couldn't help but to nod and said hey do you mind if I change the atmosphere of this place? Hiei simply shrugged while Killua nodded. With that, the dark-themed sewer turned into a grassy field filled with apple trees, and the place had a sky. It also had mountains around and birds were flying in harmony. With that, Hiei and Killua nodded towards Naruto and he was suddenly thrown away. Real world. Naruto woke up and sighed. Who knew that he was a Jinchuriki to a demon and a human? With that, he got out from his bed and went to take a shower. After that, he put on some clothes and grabbed both of his katanas. He then went downstairs to see his mother preparing breakfast. The moment Naruto got downstairs, Kushina saw him and said with a smile "Aheo, Naruto." Naruto just nodded and greeted her back. He then asked Nakasama, can I help you with the cooking? Kushina nodded and said sure, come on. After all, your cooking might be better than mine. With that, Naruto and Kushina had another bonding experience by preparing breakfast. As they had finished making breakfast, Minato came downstairs and said "Aheo, Kushi-chan and Naruto-kun." Kushina then came up to him, wrapped her hands around his neck and they both kissed. She then said "Aheo, Minakoi." Minato nodded and they both turned towards Naruto for some kind of disgusted reaction, but only saw that Naruto was unfazed by it. Minato and Kushina then got confused by the boy's reaction. With that, Minato asked Naruto, shouldn't you be grossed out? Naruto simply shook his head and said nah, I do that with Hinaheim all the time. Minato and Kushina then looked at each other while thinking what? Wait, Hinaheim? So that means he's dating Hinata from the Hyuga clan. Naruto then said anyways, come let's have breakfast I prepared pancakes, croissants, donuts and well hot dogs. With that, Minato looked at Kushina for some kind of explanation. Which she shrugged while saying Naruto has been the one who's been doing the cooking. I just observed him. Minato then nodded as he took a seat and took a bite of what his son called a hot dog. The moment he took a bite of it, he couldn't stop eating it. Kushina looked at her husband with a confused look and took a bite of her own hot dog. She then did the same. Naruto simply had a relaxed look and thought who says a guy can't cook? Huh. Unknown to him, Hiei and Killua had access to his senses. Hiei and Killua then answered I would. In unison. But Naruto found it creepy and thought oh great, both of you have access to my senses. He then waited for it seemed as if Hiei and Killua were sleeping at the same time. Naruto then mentally sighed and ate his own stack of pancakes. As he finished eating, all three of his siblings came downstairs and were confused by the food that was served. It took them a few seconds to realize that Naruto was the one cooking. Since last night, Natsumi and Mito couldn't help but to talk about their brother's cooking and here they are eating their brother's hot dogs as if it was the last food on earth. Same goes for Menma. But then, they realized that they were not supposed to eat anything. As they were trying to vomit it out, Naruto then said you don't need to vomit it out. Once it's in there, it'll stay there. He then got up, went to the front door and said anyways, gotta go. See ya, love ya. Naruto then left the compound to the gates of the Forest of Death. Near the gates of Training Ground 44. As Naruto got there, all of his other teammates were already waiting for him. Naruto then greeted all of them which they greeted back. He then saw Sasuke and Sakura holding, which could only mean one thing, they are now official. He then asked Sai what's the time now? Sai then looked up to the sky and then to Naruto, while saying I believe it's like 7:58 since the sun is still rising. So but he was interrupted by Anko and Raito suddenly appeared in a shunshin. Anko then said well, you guys appeared way earlier than me and I'm very punctual without even noticing it. She then continued anyways, Raito and I have decided to do the bell test as well and so is Kakashi's team. Raito them spoke up while holding a set of 4 bells with strings attached, so we have decided that all 5 of you will enter the forest and go to a place to hide. All 5 of you will also need to take the bells each. Sakura then raised her hand and asked but Raito-sensei, there's only 4 bells, but she was interrupted by Naruto, who asked every one of his teammates to group huddle and told them the real reason of the test, teamwork which everyone simply nodded in understanding. Anko then cleared her throat and said anyways when you encounter us, come with the intention to kill. You won't kill us I guarantee you. Raito simply nodded as he unlocked the gate to the forest. He then said also if you all fail to capture any of the bells on my waist by noon, then all of you will be back in the academy. With that, Team 11 nodded and waited for Anko to say ready, go. Which she did. As she did, everyone disappeared in a flash of darkness. With that, Raito and Anko looked at the spot where their students were standing a while ago with confusion. Anko then sighed and said to Raito, "Want to find those gakis and fail them?" Which Raito nodded in response. They then shunshin away into the forest. In an undisclosed location at the Forest of Death, Naruto and the others were sitting inside a cave while discussing plans to capture the bells. Sai spoke up first, "How about I making tigers," while Sasuke, Naruto and Sakura distract Raito-sensei and Yakumo hit Anko with a strong Jinjutsu. With that, everyone nodded except for Naruto, who was about to nod only to be stopped by Migi, who said no good. Which everyone else found it scary as hell. Sai then said in shock, "Naruto, inhales, why is your inhales right hand talking?" Naruto then quickly explained what happened and Sasuke smirked while saying, "I knew it. You were given a gift by Tsukasa Kadoya." Migi then started to show his claws and said, "Don't you dare tell anyone." With that, everyone nodded in fear. Migi then relaxed and said, "How about this? Sasuke hit both of them with a Kaiten Jutsu, and when they dodge, Naruto will hit Anko with a Kinshasa, and Anko will try to block it only for her hands being bruised and will have difficulty to do hand seals. Then, Yakumo do Jinjutsu that is super scary beyond belief. Since I've heard your Jinjutsu is drawing based, then I will give you a design of the creature I would like for you to draw." Naruto then will grab the bells quickly and Yakumo will have to dispel it. However, Sai will make an ink creature of the same design to scare them a little bit more. Then, that's where Sakura comes in. You will have to make a trap that will immobilize them. With this plan, it will be totally foolproof. With that, everyone was simply impressed by the tactics given by a talking right hand. Naruto then simply nodded to the plan, and so did everyone else. At a different location, Raito and Anko were searching for the brats for like a few seconds ago. As they were getting bored, Raito suddenly smelled fire coming straight towards them. He then said to Anko, "Duck." Which she did as a giant ball of flame known as the Kaiten Kakekyu no Jutsu was heading straight towards them. As they avoided the flame, a familiar blonde suddenly appeared in front of Anko in midair while doing a jumping turning kick motion. Anko then tried to block it with her hands, only to be shocked by his sudden shout of Kinshasa. And bruised her said hands. She then flicked both of her hands as if she was having Parkinson. Raito then tried to slash Naruto with his katana, but Naruto blocked it with senshi. Naruto then showed his tongue and said, "Yakumo, now." Raito was confused by what he meant when suddenly, Anko and him were stuck in some kind of Jinjutsu. Ninjutsu world. They were in a dark room with only a door. There was no designs, no furniture, just darkness. As Raito and Anko was about to dispel it, the door suddenly opened by itself to reveal a creepy doll wearing a white dress. Raito was enthralled by this and went to touch it. As he touched it, Raito and Anko had to experience the events of the true life story of Annabelle. Meanwhile in the real world, Naruto and the others were laughing their butts off as Raito and Anko were rolling on the floor in fear. A few seconds later, Naruto stopped laughing and took the bells. Yakumo then dispelled the Jinjutsu as Sai summoned a moving ink-styled Annabelle. As the Jinjutsu dispelled, Anko and Raito were shouting of random gibberish. However, when they saw the Annabelle, they were shouting like, "Oh no, not her again. And please make it stop." Unknown to both of them, Sakura was waiting inside a bush with ropes and a log. She then heard Naruto's signal of toot toot. Then it was showtime and Sakura managed to tie both of them to a log. When Raito and Anko realized, they simply sighed and Raito said, "So it seems that you guys know the true meaning of test, Which Naruto nodded rather quickly and said it was a test of teamwork, right guys? Everyone else simply nodded in agreement. Anko then sighed again, "I guess that we'll have to pass all of you in record time, 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Well done, now get both of us out of this trap, will ya?" Which everyone obliged and didn't want any trouble with the snake mistress. And that was the day that Team 11 was an official team. A few hours later. Hokage's office. Minato was in his seat looking at his assigned Gownins and said, "Alright, tell me whether they pass or not starting from Team 1. Team 1, failed. Team 2, failed. Team 3, failed. Team 4, failed. Team 5, failed. Team 6, failed. Team 7, passed thanks to their amazing teamwork since they are siblings which helped them out even more," said Kakashi to Minato while still reading his smut. Team 8 passed, but Kiba is well a bit of a lone wolf at first. But then decided to just help out Hinata and Shino, said Kunai, who Minato simply nodded. Team 10 passed but barely as Ino wouldn't stop talking about how she should be in the same team as Sasuke. However, she realized that she should help out as well, said Asuma while still smoking his cigarette. Everyone then turned towards Anko and Raito, who were unsure on what to say. Raito then saw his dad, who was doing a "just do it" pose. With that, he sighed and said Team 11 passed with flying colors. They found out the real reason of the test early on and passed in record time. 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Naruto was simply amazing as he bruised both of Anko's hands by kicking them while shouting a Kinshasa. I believe. Everyone was simply shocked by this, including Jiraiya, who was there to be Minato's temporary advisor. Anko then showed her still bruised up hands to everyone and said, Hokage-sama, that son of yours is one hell of a fighter. I'll tell you that. Minato then simply nodded as he had already known of Naruto's abilities. He then said, alright, send the failed ones back to the academy and find the suitable teammates for every one of them. Now, everyone dismissed including Jiraiya-sensei. Except for Raito, I will need to talk to you, I'm afraid. But that, Jiraiya and every Jounin except for Raito disappeared in a shunshin. However, Raito noticed his father giving a thumbs up and wink before disappearing. Minato then cleared his throat and said to Raito-san, my eldest son's team really did passes in flying colors. Which Raito nodded rather quickly and said he really did. I mean, he actually made a tactic that was foolproof. But that, Minato nodded in understanding and said okay, you are now dismissed. Jounin Raito. Raito simply nodded and disappeared in a shunshin. Minato then sighed and thought, if this keeps going on, I'll be beginning to think that Naruto is the child of the prophecy. Well, one thing for sure, I will castrate Jiraiya-sensei personally if he's wrong. Chapter 5. A few seconds later. To say that Naruto was confused why his new senseis disappeared was a complete understatement. He was simply baffled for a few seconds, but then realized that they have already done their part of the deal. But that, Naruto shrugged and tried out his customized sword with a clockwork mechanism of indeterminate nature built into the space above the hilt and a pair of parallel handguards is set beneath. The sword could also take a form of a scythe by pressing a button. This was given by Crow since Crow was the one who taught him, or rather his clones, how to use a scythe. But the memory feedback given by his clones, Naruto quickly slice open several dummies with a single strike. With that, Naruto smiled and looked at his new weapon while saying, I should name you Death Stalker and I should probably keep you in a storage scroll. But that, Naruto decided to take out an empty storage scroll and place Death Stalker into it. Thus, the Death Stalker was transported into the pocket dimension until Naruto would like to use it again. Naruto then tried out the hidden blades, as Alter would call it, by jumping onto a random dummy and stabbed it in the temple area. As he retracted his blade out, the stuffings from the temple area of the dummy started to come out and all it left was an unstuffed dummy head. With that, Naruto was yet again impressed by its design, uses and advantages. Naruto then thought, I should probably put both of you in the same storage scroll as well. Naruto then removed the hidden blades and placed them into the same storage scroll. With that, his hidden blades went into the pocket dimension as well. Naruto then put his left hand onto the back of his shoulder to feel a gun handle. With that, he brought it forwards while placing his index finger on the trigger. He then realized that it was a rifle sniper as it had a scope on it. He then smirked as he looked up and saw a bird flying. With that, Naruto decided to aim his sniper rifle towards the bird, placed his left eye onto the scope and pulled the trigger. As the bullet flew, a gunshot was heard and the bullet pierced through the bird. Naruto just couldn't help but to smirk at his new weapon and his new abilities. Not only has his eyesight got better with the help of the eagle vision, he also realized that he wanted to shoot powerful projectiles from his hands towards random people while shouting Hadouken. He did exactly that after storing his sniper into a storage scroll as he felt a sudden pulse from both of his katanas. With that, Naruto sensed jealousy coming from Kyofu no Ken and Senshi, but more to Kyofu no Ken. Naruto then decided to look up to the sun setting, which meant he needed to get home. With that, Naruto did a hand seal and Gokubushin into his house. Namikaze compound. As he got there, he was greeted by the shock look given by his mother, but then turned into a sour look and said, Naruto, next time do it outside the house. Because, you left scorch marks on the 6000 Ryo carpet. But that, Naruto realized his mistake and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly while saying, Gomen Kasama, I forgot that the Gokushunshin leaves those kind of marks. Kushina simply shook her head and said, it's alright, I hated that carpet anyways. Also, can you explain about Migi? Naruto nodded and shook Migi awake. As Migi woke up, Minato walked into the living room while saying, Tadai Naruto, why does your right hand have an eyeball? Naruto looked at his father with an embarrassed smile and said, it's a long story, so it goes like this, adds flashback in chapter 3, and that's how I got Migi, I think. Minato couldn't believe it, but when he saw Migi nodding to the explanation, he shrugged and said, if the council know about this, then they will try to take it away from you, regardless. In response, Migi did a shaking head gesture and said, that cannot be done. You see, Hokage-sama, once my kind is with a host or body, I am attached to him or her until he or she dies. So by trying to mass produce, I will die instantly. Minato and Kushina then nodded in understanding. Migi then looked at Naruto and said, I'm tired, I need to sleep. But that, Naruto regained his right hand control back and said in a low tone, don't tell this to any of my siblings yet. I don't want any of them or more specifically Menma to gossip about it. Minato, not wanting to be treated coldly by his son simply nodded and so did Kushina. With that, it went totally quiet for a few seconds up until Kushina said anyways Naruto, we can't have dinner yet since your siblings are not here and I haven't prepared dinner yet. So you can tell us about your training with your other senseis. Minato then looked at Kushina with a weird look but obliged and decided to listen to what Naruto would say, while thinking that it wouldn't blow his mind. Oh, how wrong he was. 20 minutes later. Minato looked at his son with disbelief as the young lad had finished his story. He then managed to stutter some words so oh wait, Levi II is still alive. Naruto simply nodded in response and said however, he's not willing to see you yet. After what you did, he doesn't want to see any of you. With that, both parents flinched at the same time. As Minato was about to say something, Naruto shook his head and said it's okay, I don't hate any of you really. You're still my family after all. I mean, Kasama was the one who had to go through hell and came back to Earth just to give birth to all four of us. Minato and Kushina looked at each other while having relieved looks on their faces. Suddenly, the door opened to reveal Menma, Mito and Natsumi while announcing in unison to Dama. Which Minato and Kushina said in response to Carry. As the children went in, they except for Menma were shocked to see Naruto waving at them while saying yo. With that, both sisters ran up to him and hugged him in unison to the ground while saying Naruto and Nikki, forgive us. Which Naruto replied with a chuckle and ruffled both of their heads while saying it's alright, Imautos. I'm great. He then gently removed their hands and walked towards his dumbfounded brother. He then held out his hand and said hi Ataudo, how about this? If you beat me in any fight we both agree on, then I will stay out of your way in becoming the next Hokage. However, if I beat you in any fight we both agree on, then you will stop calling a loser. How about it? With that, Menma was unsure why his brother was still talking to him. A few seconds later, he then shook the hand and nodded while saying deal. Naruto then smiled, let go of the hand and announced I'll be making dinner tonight, if you don't mind. Kushina was about to protest, but Minato shook his head towards her and gave her a look that said I'm interested in what he'll be making. Just let him do it. With that, Kushina nodded and let Naruto cook any dish he would like. Naruto then simply nodded and walked to the kitchen to cook while his family observed. They saw him making dough, put some toppings on it with cheese and placed it into the oven. A few minutes of waiting, Naruto came out with a giant wooden plate that was carrying a circle with pepperoni, cheese and sauce as its toppings. Naruto then prepared the food onto the dining table. With the help of his Gokubushins, he was able to prepare a pot of tea, some rice, a bowl of grilled chicken and a bowl of salad. He then dispelled his clones and did the finishing touches of the food. Thus, shocking everyone in the house while inwardly shouting Nani. Naruto then looked towards his family members and gave them a smile while saying dinner is served. Please enjoy. With that, everyone took each of their seats and digged in. By the time Natsumi tried a slice of the circle, she was in bliss and said to her eldest brother Naniki, what do you call the circle? It's the best food I've ever tasted well after ramen of course. Naruto simply smiled and said it's called a pizza. A dish one of my senseis taught me while I was training with him one day. He then looked at Menma who was enjoying every dish Naruto made. With that, Naruto said so Menma, how's my cooking? Menma was not too sure whether to belittle Naruto or praise him because it was really good, but it was made by his loser brother. With that, Menma blushed in embarrassment while saying in a low tone it's not bad, I guess. Which received laughter from everyone in the dining room. A few minutes later. Naruto sighed as he sat on his bed of his room while observing Migi who was reading random books. Naruto then said what are you doing now, Migi? Migi then turned towards Naruto and said finding information about chakra and the shinobi world. Naruto shook his head and asked well, what have you found out? Migi then said with no emotion in his voice, I've learned about Jinchuricus, which means a sacrifice for a human being to seal a powerful tailed beast or demon inside of them. Naruto nodded and said yes that happens to be all three of my siblings. Migi shook his head or rather hand and said what do you mean three? You're a Jinchuriki as well. Naruto looked at Migi with a confused look and said what do you mean, I'm a Jinchuriki. I don't contain the Kyuubi's energy inside of me or its soul. Migi then did a thinking pose and said how do I say this? When I came into your body just to invade your brain, something or rather someone inside of you stopped me from doing so. He had 3 eyes and he was short. He also had black spiky hair with white streaks. He was also wearing a black long-sleeved shirt with black pants. By the time, I thought there was only one being. But I was wrong, it turns out that you have 2 souls sealed into you. One of them, the man who I was referring to was definitely a demon. Then, there was another person who looks around your age. He had spiky silver hair, very pale skin and blue eyes. He also wears baggy clothing, with his attire consisting of long-sleeved and dark-colored shirts. He also was wearing baggy shorts. However, this man is definitely not a demon. Naruto looked at Migi surprised and asked if so, where is my seal mark? Migi then extended himself towards Naruto's back and gently touched the boy's neck. As Migi touched Naruto's neck, Naruto felt a sudden surge of electricity. With that, Naruto said, alright Migi, that's enough. I need to go to bed. I have an important day tomorrow. Migi nodded and Naruto lied on the bed while placing the back of his left arm onto his eyes. He then closed his eyes and went to sleep. Mindscape. Naruto suddenly woke up in a sewer and thought, what am I doing in a sewer? He then picked himself up and walked towards a random opening. As he got in, he saw a giant cage that revealed two men just like what Migi described to him about. With that, he spoke up, who are you guys? In response, one of the man who was wearing black said, so it seems that our jailer has visited us, Killua. The other man who was identified as Killua simply nodded and said definitely hi. Naruto was simply dumbfounded and said, wait, am I both of your vessels? Which the man who identified himself as Hai simply nodded in response. Killua then continued, you see, we were transported here by a certain man but was interrupted by Naruto who said named Tsukasa Kadoya, right? Hai then nodded and so did Killua. Killua then said also, he asked us to train you with some of our powers but was interrupted by Hai who said which we agreed on rather quickly. Naruto then shook his head while saying this Tsukasa Kadoya is really starting to annoy me. I mean he gave me a talking right hand. Unknown to him, Migi had awoken in the mindscape and said, what do you mean? He's just really trying to help you. Which frightened Naruto who said while looking at Migi directly, Ga, why are you in my mindscape? Migi then said I'm a part of you. So, it's definitely normal. Naruto simply sighed in defeat while Killua came up to the boy and said you do realize that you're our Jinchuriki. Right? Naruto couldn't came up with any answer, so he just nodded. Hai then got closer to the boy and said Naruto, I will teach you every single technique that I know of, and so will Killua. Killua simply nodded and said yes, but however, you won't train with us until you pass that true genin test. Naruto couldn't help but to nod and said hey do you mind if I change the atmosphere of this place? Hai simply shrugged while Killua nodded. With that, the dark-themed sewer turned into a grassy field filled with apple trees and the place had a sky. It also had mountains around and birds were flying in harmony. With that, Hai and Killua nodded towards Naruto and he was suddenly thrown away. Real world. Naruto woke up and sighed. Who knew that he was a Jinchuriki to a demon and a human? With that, he got out from his bed and went to take a shower. After that, he put on some clothes and grabbed both of his katanas. He then went downstairs to see his mother preparing breakfast. The moment Naruto got downstairs, Kushina saw him and said with a smile, "Aheo, Naruto." Naruto just nodded and greeted her back. He then asked Nakasama, "Can I help you with the cooking?" Kushina nodded and said, "Sure, come on. After all, your cooking might be better than mine." With that, Naruto and Kushina had another bonding experience by preparing breakfast. As they had finished making breakfast, Minato came downstairs and said, "Aheo, Kushi-chan and Naruto-kun." Kushina then came up to him, wrapped her hands around his neck and they both kissed. She then said, "Aheo, Minakoi." Minato nodded and they both turned towards Naruto for some kind of disgusted reaction, but only saw that Naruto was unfazed by it. Minato and Kushina then got confused by the boy's reaction. With that, Minato asked Naruto, "Shouldn't you be grossed out?" Naruto simply shook his head and said, "Nah, I do that with Hinaheim all the time." Minato and Kushina then looked at each other while thinking, what? Wait, Hinaheim? So that means he's dating Hinata from the Hyuga clan. Naruto then said, "Anyways, come let's have breakfast. I prepared pancakes, croissants, donuts and well hot dogs." With that, Minato looked at Kushina for some kind of explanation. Which she shrugged while saying Naruto has been the one who's been doing the cooking. I just observed him. Minato then nodded as he took a seat and took a bite of what his son called a hot dog. The moment he took a bite of it, he couldn't stop eating it. Kushina looked at her husband with a confused look and took a bite of her own hot dog. She then did the same. Naruto simply had a relaxed look and thought who says a guy can't cook? Huh. Unknown to him, Hai and Killua had access to his senses. Hai and Killua then answered, "I would." In unison. Which Naruto found it creepy and thought, "Oh great, both of you have access to my senses." He then waited for it seemed as if Hai and Killua were sleeping at the same time. Naruto then mentally sighed and ate his own stack of pancakes. As he finished eating, all three of his siblings came downstairs and were confused by the food that was served. It took them a few seconds to realize that Naruto was the one cooking. Since last night, Natsumi and Mito couldn't help but to talk about their brother's cooking and here they are eating their brother's hot dogs as if it was the last food on earth. Same goes for Menma. But then, they realized that they were not supposed to eat anything. As they were trying to vomit it out, Naruto then said you don't need to vomit it out. Once it's in there, it'll stay there. He then got up, went to the front door, and said anyways, gotta go. See ya, love ya. Naruto then left the compound to the gates of the Forest of Death. Near the gates of Training Ground 44. As Naruto got there, all of his other teammates were already waiting for him. Naruto then greeted all of them, which they greeted back. He then saw Sasuke and Sakura holding, which could only mean one thing, they are now official. He then asked Sai what's the time now? Sai then looked up to the sky and then to Naruto, while saying I believe it's like 7:58 since the sun is still rising. But he was interrupted by Anko, and Raito suddenly appeared in a shunshin. Anko then said well, you guys appeared way earlier than me and I'm very punctual without even noticing it. She then continued anyways, Raito and I have decided to do the bell test as well, and so is Kakashi's team. Raito them spoke up while holding a set of 4 bells with strings attached, so we have decided that all 5 of you will enter the forest and go to a place to hide. All 5 of you will also need to take the bells each. Sakura then raised her hand and asked but Raito-sensei, there's only 4 bells, but she was interrupted by Naruto, who asked every one of his teammates to group huddle and told them the real reason of the test, teamwork, which everyone simply nodded in understanding. Anko then cleared her throat and said anyways when you encounter us, come with the intention to kill. You won't kill us, I guarantee you. Raito simply nodded as he unlocked the gate to the forest. He then said also if you all fail to capture any of the bells on my waist by noon, then all of you will be back in the academy. With that, Team 11 nodded and waited for Anko to say ready, go. Which she did. As she did, everyone disappeared in a flash of darkness. With that, Raito and Anko looked at the spot where their students were standing a while ago with confusion. Anko then sighed and said to Raito, want to find those gakis and fail them? But Raito nodded in response. They then shunshin away into the forest. In an undisclosed location at the Forest of Death. Naruto and the others were sitting inside a cave while discussing plans to capture the bells. Sai spoke up first, how about I making tigers, while Sasuke, Naruto and Sakura distract Raito-sensei and Yakumo hit Anko with a strong Jinjutsu. With that, everyone nodded except for Naruto, who was about to nod only to be stopped by Migi, who said no good. But everyone else found it scary as hell. Sai then said in shock, Naruto inhales, why is your inhales right hand talking? Naruto then quickly explained what happened and Sasuke smirked while saying I knew it. You were given a gift by Tsukasa Kadoya. Migi then started to show his claws and said don't you dare tell anyone. With that, everyone nodded in fear. Migi then relaxed and said how about this? Sasuke hit both of them with a Kenjutsu, and when they dodge, Naruto will hit Anko with a Kinshasa, and Anko will try to block it only for her hands being bruised and will have difficulty to do hand seals. Then, Yakumo do Jinjutsu that is super scary beyond belief. Since I've heard your Jinjutsu is drawing based, then I will give you a design of the creature I would like for you to draw. Naruto then will grab the bells quickly and Yakumo will have to dispel it. However, Sai will make an ink creature of the same design to scare them a little bit more. Then, that's where Sakura comes in. You will have to make a trap that will immobilize them. With this plan, it will be totally foolproof. With that, everyone was simply impressed by the tactics given by a talking right hand. Naruto then simply nodded to the plan and so did everyone else. At a different location. Raito and Anko were searching for the brats for like a few seconds ago. As they were getting bored, Raito suddenly smelled fire coming straight towards them. He then said to Anko duck. Which she did as a giant ball of flame known as the Katen. Dikyaku no Jutsu was heading straight towards them. As they avoided the flame, a familiar blonde suddenly appeared in front of Anko in midair while doing a jumping turning kick motion. Anko then tried to block it with her hands, only to be shocked by his sudden shout of Kinshasa. And bruised her said hands. She then flicked both of her hands as if she was having Parkinson. Raito then tried to slash Naruto with his katana, but Naruto blocked it with senshi. Naruto then showed his tongue and said Yakumo, now. Raito was confused by what he meant when suddenly, Anko and him were stuck in some kind of Jinjutsu. Ninjutsu world. They were in a dark room with only a door. There was no designs, no furniture, just darkness. As Raito and Anko was about to dispel it, the door suddenly opened by itself to reveal a creepy doll wearing a white dress. Raito was enthralled by this and went to touch it. As he touched it, Raito and Anko had to experience the events of the true life story of Annabelle. Meanwhile in the real world, Naruto and the others were laughing their butts off as Raito and Anko were rolling on the floor in fear. A few seconds later, Naruto stopped laughing and took the bells. Yakumo then dispelled the Jinjutsu as Sai summoned a moving ink-styled Annabelle. As the Jinjutsu dispelled, Anko and Raito were shouting of random gibberish. However, when they saw the Annabelle, they were shouting like oh no, not her again. And please make it stop. Unknown to both of them, Sakura was waiting inside a bush with ropes and a log. She then heard Naruto's signal of toot toot. Then it was showtime and Sakura managed to tie both of them to a log. When Raito and Anko realized, they simply sighed and Raito said, "So it seems that you guys know the true meaning of test, Which Naruto nodded rather quickly and said it was a test of teamwork, right guys? Everyone else simply nodded in agreement. Anko then sighed again, "I guess that we'll have to pass all of you in record time, 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Well done, now get both of us out of this trap will ya?" Which everyone obliged and didn't want any trouble with the snake mistress. And that was the day that Team 11 was an official team. A few hours later. Hokage's office. Minato was in his seat, looking at his assigned Gownins, and said, "Alright, tell me whether they pass or not starting from Team 1. Team 1, failed. Team 2, failed. Team 3, failed. Team 4, failed. Team 5, failed. Team 6, failed. Team 7, passed thanks to their amazing teamwork since they are siblings which helped them out even more," said Kakashi to Minato while still reading his smut. Team 8 passed, but Kiba is well a bit of a lone wolf at first. But then decided to just help out Hinata and Shino. Said Kunai, who Minato simply nodded. Team 10 passed but barely as Ino wouldn't stop talking about how she should be in the same team as Sasuke. However, she realized that she should help out as well. Said Asuma while still smoking his cigarette. Everyone then turned towards Anko and Raito who were unsure on what to say. Raito then saw his dad who was doing a "just do it" pose. But that, he sighed and said Team 11 passed with flying colors. They found out the real reason of the test early on and passed in record time. 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Naruto was simply amazing as he bruised both of Anko's hands by kicking them while shouting a Kinshasa. I believe. Everyone was simply shocked by this including Jiraiya who was there to be Minato's temporary advisor. Anko then showed her still bruised up hands to everyone and said, "Hokage-sama, that son of yours is one hell of a fighter. I'll tell you that." Minato then simply nodded as he had already known of Naruto's abilities. He then said, "Alright, send the failed ones back to the academy and find the suitable teammates for every one of them." Now, everyone dismissed including Jiraiya-sensei. Except for Raito, "I will need to talk to you, I'm afraid." But that, Jiraiya and every Jounin except for Raito disappeared in a shunshin. However, Raito noticed his father giving a thumbs up and wink before disappearing. Minato then cleared his throat and said to Raito-san, "My eldest son's team really did passes in flying colors." Which Raito nodded rather quickly and said he really did. I mean, he actually made a tactic that was foolproof. With that, Minato nodded in understanding and said, "Okay, you are now dismissed. Jounin Raito." Raito simply nodded and disappeared in a shunshin. Minato then sighed and thought, if this keeps going on, I'll be beginning to think that Naruto is the child of the prophecy. Well, one thing for sure, I will castrate Jiraiya-sensei personally if he's wrong. Chapter 6. A month later. "Damn cat, I'll kill you when I get the chance," shouted Sasuke towards the now tamed demon cat known as Tora, who was on Naruto's comfortable arms. "Sasuke, just be quiet. Even if it was a cat from hell, it is still the main objective of the mission," advised Raito who had claw marks on his face. Which Sakura, Sai and Yakumo nodded in agreement towards their younger sensei's statement. What was happening, you might ask? Well, Team 12 just finished another D-rank mission which was their 50th of the month by the way. They were also walking towards the Hokage Tower to report. Naruto then suddenly said on the journey, while gently stroking Tora's fur, "Naruto-sensei, I think the wife of the daimyo should really stop giving him bear hugs. I mean, I feel bad for him. I can feel or Migi can feel that he's in a lot of pain." Raito and Anko nodded simply because in the past month, Naruto had already introduced Raito and Anko to Migi, which at first, they thought it was a prank. But when Migi started talking, they were scared shitless. Also in the past month, Hiei and Killua did their part of their deal with Tsukasa by training Naruto in the boy's mindscape. Naruto learned everything from Hiei and Killua there, except for Hiei's Yuganshi form and Killua's assassin mode, since he had already mastered both the Kontongan and the Kamimoto. Other than that, Naruto actually started being nicer to his family, except for Menma, which he decided to giving him a lesson by beating him in a spar fight. He even showed his father and mother his jutsus that he created by himself. The moment he showed the powers of the Dakisophia, both of them were totally baffled. He also learned a new jutsu from Levi which he dubbed as KM Kryoku Manikba Jutsu, which in English means anti-gravitational maneuvering jutsu. The jutsu can give the user the ability to fly or rather glide through the air. Finally, Shadow decided to teach Naruto on how to use his sacred Kanten Kontoru, but he could only use it once in 2 months. Hokage's office. To say that Minato was shocked to see that Tora was comfortably on Naruto's hands was an understatement. He was simply dumbfounded. The moment Naruto gently gave the cat to the woman, he quickly said, "I'm not trying to be rude, but you should stop hugging him too hard." Which the lady quickly nodded in response as she saw Tora's pleading and left the room, but not before paying the nice ninja team. With that, Minato nodded as Raito and Anko finished their report and said well done. I have decided to give all 5 of you a C-rank mission. Iruka then raised his hand while clearing his throat and said Hokage-sama, if I may, don't you think it's a bit too early for them? Which Minato simply shook his head towards and said, I think that is up for Raito and Anko to decide. He then turned towards both Anko and Reisho and said in a caring tone, so are they ready, Jounin Anko and Jounin Raito? With that, Raito and Anko looked at each other for a while and then Raito said, I think they're ready for a C-rank mission, Hokage-sama. Remember, they did pass the exams in record time. Which Minato nodded as he looked at his son who raised his hand while saying to Sama, I feel a bad aura coming towards us who goes by the name of Menma. With that, Menma literally came in by kicking the door and shouted to San, I want a better mission. Meanwhile his sisters were facepalming and so did Kakashi. Minato was about to answer, but Iruka shouted in response, Menma, your team barely even finished 25 D-rank missions. You need at least 30. Which Menma simply held out his tongue, but then Naruto raised his hand again and said, what about have team 7 and mine in a joint C-rank mission? That way, you can at least feel a bit better with this mission. So for the sake of my brother, please let both of our teams be part of this mission. With that, Minato did a thinking pose in silence. In that moment, everyone else in the room couldn't help but to feel a bit tense, except for Naruto who was thinking of how to master the Kanten Kontoru without having to only use it once a month. A few seconds later, Minato nodded and said very well, Naruto. Iruka, get an Anbu to fetch Tazuna. With that, Iruka simply nodded and went outside to get an Anbu. He then came back in, and an Anbu appeared in a shunshin alongside a middle-aged man wearing glasses. He was also holding a half-finished sake bottle. As the man saw everyone in the room other than Minato and Iruka, he simply complained, Hokage-sama, I asked for real ninjas, not a blue-wearing duck head, a crop top-wearing pale-looking boy, a girl who looks like she's about to die, a pink-haired girl with an odd forehead and a few quadruplets. Wait, actually the blonde in black looks cool. With that, Menma tried to charge towards the man only to be grabbed by both Natsumi and Mito. Kakashi then cleared his throat and said, well Tazuna-san, my son's team and mine can surely take whatever mission you want us to do. The man who identified himself as Tazuna simply nodded and was about to take a swig of his sake, only for it to be sliced in pieces by Senshi. As Tazuna looked at Naruto who's sheathing Senshi, he said, don't underestimate my team or my siblings. We can surely handle a few tasks. With that, the middle-aged man nodded in fear, while Minato who widened his eyes thought, wow, that was really fast. Amazing. Even I couldn't see that coming and I'm the fastest man alive. Minato then cleared his throat and said, anyways, both of your teams will be escorting and protecting Tazuna until he finishes his bridge. All of you will leave in 2 hours. And Kakashi, don't be late. With that, everyone left the room and went to their respective rooms to pack their stuff. For Naruto, he had to bring a number of storage scrolls so that he could carry his stuff way easier. As he placed all of his stuff into his storage scrolls, he then turned around to see both of his sisters looking at him with confused looks. With that, Naruto then cleared his throat and said, what, is there something wrong? Mito then raised her hand and said, oh no Nai-chan, why haven't you packed a bag? Shouldn't you at least have one to store all of your supplies? Naruto simply chuckled in response and said, dear Amato, you see I used a storage scroll to store all of my supplies. With this, I can carry anything that I want without carrying too much weight. With that, both sisters did a no. Look and nodded. Naruto then said as he looks at his alarm clock, anyways, we have some time to kill. So, what do you want to do? Both Mito and Natsumi looked at each other for a moment and nodded at the same time. Natsumi then said, we want to know more about you and Nikki. With that, Naruto simply couldn't help but to nod and said, I guess it would be alright. Very well. On the day when Menma was announced to be the next clan head, I ran away to a random training ground and started punching a random tree while crying. As my hand started to bleed, a man who goes by the name Tsukasa Kadoya stopped me and gave me these katanas. He then said it was like a birthday gift and mysteriously disappeared. As I was recovering from shock, that's when I met all 5 of my senseis. They accepted to me to be their apprentice and taught me everything they know. Their respective wives, well except for one, taught me about morals, reading and life lessons. Also, one of my senseis taught me how to cook. That's why I can cook really well. Mito and Natsumi were completely baffled by their eldest brother's story. All they could think was, who is this Tsukasa Kadoya? And what does he want from a Nikki? Unknown to them, Tsukasa appeared out of nowhere and said, hoi Naruto, I need to tell you, oh wait, your sisters are here, oh well. With that, Natsumi and Mito took out a kunai each and got into a fighting stance. As they did that, Tsukasa couldn't help but to smirk and said, calm down, I'm Tsukasa Kadoya. The man who changed your brother's life. Both girls then put down their kunais and sighed. Naruto then looked at Tsukasa. What do you need, Tsukasa? Tsukasa simply smiled and took out a stash of books. Which Naruto simply grabbed them and placed them on his study desk. He then turned towards Tsukasa and said thank you, now I can read more books from you. I must say that they are very nice to read. Which Tsukasa simply chuckled and said well, I did guess you would finish the book I gave you yesterday. So today, I decided to give you a lot more of these. With that, Naruto couldn't help but to give him a hug and said thank you Tsukasa Kadoya. Tsukasa simply hugged back and said welcome. He then let go of the hug and disappeared in a flash of light. Naruto then turned around to see not only his sisters baffled but Menma and Kushina as well. Kushina then cleared your throat and said was TT that Tsukasa Kato YY ya? With that, Naruto nodded in agreement and said yes, that's Tsukasa Kadoya and yes he doesn't look like what he says to be, but that doesn't mean that he ain't powerful. Which Menma snorted in response and was about to say something only for a sudden zip to be zipped open in midair to reveal Kouta Kazuraba. In instance everyone except for Naruto took out their weapons while Kushina took out a frying pan. Naruto simply had stars in his eyes and said you're Kouta Kazuraba, the man of the beginning. Oh my god. Which the god simply nodded in response. He then turned towards Menma and said hello Menma-kun, you really do not want to piss off that man. Also, you should know to never underestimate anyone and that Tsukasa Kadoya happens to be one of the only people that most people had to think twice to underestimate. This caused everyone except for Naruto to drop their jaws to the floor. In which Kouta simply chuckled and said anyways you guys are about to be late so, Jana. With that, Kouta disappeared in a flash of light in which Naruto quickly grabbed all of his siblings and disappeared in a Gokushunshin, but not before saying bye to their mother. Fate of Konoha. As they reached the gate, they were surprised that Kakashi was early and Anko was nowhere to be seen. Raito and his other teammates were there as well even the client, Tazuna. It all went quiet for a while and it turned awkward. With that, Naruto said Raito-sensei, where is Anko-sensei? As Raito was about to answer, Anko appeared in a shunshin with a stick of unfinished dango. Anko then said in a muffled tone Himsoi, I ate and watched Wango. Raito then simply sighed as he face-palmed while Kakashi put a hand on his son's shoulder and said hang in there, Musuko. Which Raito could not help but to nod. Kakashi then cleared his throat and said towards the Genins now, let's start our mission. With that, both Team 7 and Team 11 with their client left the gates of Konoha towards Wave. A few hours of a boring journey later, Naruto stumbled upon a puddle of water and thought what's this? A puddle of water. But, it hasn't been raining lately. Unknown to him, Migi silently extended itself and whispered into his ear PSS, Naruto that is a Jinjutsu. I suggest you should do something about it. In which the 12-year-old boy nodded and silently smirked. He then suddenly said aloud guys, I need to pee if you don't mind. Can all of you turn around? With that, everyone simply nodded and turned around. Naruto then proceeded to zip down his pants and took out his chicken to piss on the puddle of water. As he finished peeing, he zipped it up again as the Jinjutsu was dispelled to reveal two B-rank Chunins known as the Demon Brothers, named Gaozu and Maizu. The other ninjas turned around to laugh at the sight of both men being pissed on. Gaozu then shouted in embarrassment while readying his claw damn Gaki, all we want is to kill that old man, but you just pissed on us. In which Naruto responded coolly with a my bad you're still gonna die though. With that, Gaozu and Maizu charged towards Naruto in Chunin speed while trying to strike only for the boy to unsheath both Senshi and Kyofu no Ken and blocked both strikes. Which surprised his siblings at how quick their brother reacted. As the demon brothers looked at Naruto with shock, the boy simply smirked and said Sasuke, Sai, formation 4. With that, Sasuke and Sai nodded and ran with Sasuke up front while Sai at the back readying his Tanto. Sasuke then jumped and gave Gaozu a swift roundhouse kick to the head and succeeded while Sai tried to stab Maizu only to be blocked by the said ninja. Unfortunately for Maizu, he was given a kick to the face by Naruto or rather Kinshasa. As both brothers stumbled backwards, Naruto then said Menma, you can join if you want while Natsumi, Mito, Sakura and Yakumo defend the client. But that, said ninjas simply nodded and did what they were told except for Menma who joined the fight just to show superiority. Meanwhile, Kakashi and the other Jounins were shocked by the teamwork shown by their respective teams towards each other. Menma then shouted to the top of his lungs and gave a jumping chopping kick to Maizu's head while Naruto swept the same ninja's foot to the ground. While Sasuke and Sai agreed to hit Gaozu with a flurry of fast attacks that even the Jounin instructors could barely catch up. A few seconds later, Naruto and Menma knocked Maizu down with a double kick to the place where the sun never shines while Sasuke and Sai finished off their opponent with a double super kick to the face. As both demon brothers were knocked out, Naruto quickly placed a paralyzing seal on both men each. He then turned around towards Raito and said Naruto-sensei, why were the demon brothers hunting down our client? I thought this was a C rank. In response, Raito, Kakashi and Anko turned towards Tazuna for an explanation which happened really quickly. Tazuna then told everyone about the current state of Wave, how it was being run by a manipulative and money-hungry businessman, and how many people has died because of not paying taxes. With that, Kakashi nodded and so did Anko and Raito. Kakashi then looked at his team and said, well, this mission just turned A rank. But, what do you three think? Should we continue? To his surprise, all three Namikazes nodded and said in unison, Kakashi-sensei, we will continue the mission. But Menma added, if we didn't continue, then I would not prove my worth as a ninja. Kakashi could not help but to nod in agreement. He then sighed and said, very well, let's continue the mission. Then, Raito and Anko was about to ask the same thing only for their team to say in unison, senseis, we'll just continue the mission. Seeing that the Konoha simply agreed to help, Tazuna could not help but to cry tears of joy and said thank you. With that, they continued their journey. On a small boat. Aniki, don't you want to ride on the boat with us? Natsumi said in confusion. Naruto simply shook his head in response and said don't need to. He then took a step on the water and everyone except for his team were shocked to see Naruto floating or rather standing on water. Naruto then continued, I can just walk on water after all. A few minutes later, Menma noticed something or rather someone observing the group of ninjas. As he heard a ruffle, he quickly threw a kunai towards a bush only to reveal a white-furred bunny running around. With that, he was punched in the back of the head by both Mito and Natsumi while saying Baka, you could have killed that poor bunny. Unknown to the Gownins except for Naruto, the Gownins were thinking a white-furred bunny? That could only mean. Kakashi then shouted duck. And the group did as they were told. Apparently, a big cleaver sword was about to strike them. Raito then looked up to see a man who covered his mouth area with bandages, a kiri hit eye and a pair of trousers. He was also holding Kubikirabacho, one of the swords of the 7 deadly swordsmen in Kiri. Raito then simply unsheathed his katana and said Zabuza Mamachi, the demon of Kiri, I should have known. Zabuza simply did a sinister laugh and said, no wonder the demon brothers couldn't kill the old geezer. Sharingan no Kakashi, the snake mistress of Konoha, and who are you? Well, pointing towards Raito who was fuming with anger. Raito then sighed and said in a low voice, well, I did just turn Jounin this year. Zabuza then laughed again and said, this is a meeting that I've always wanted to have. Kakashi then said as he revealed his Sharingan and took out a kunai, well then, I hope you can give Anko, my son and I a good fight. Meanwhile, Sasuke was amazed that Kakashi had a Sharingan and thought wow, he has a Sharingan. Zabuza then smirked under his bandages and got ready to attack. Raito and Kakashi got into a fighting stance while Anko had a nosebleed for some reason, in which Kakashi asked Anko, why do you have a nosebleed? Anko subconsciously wiped her nose and said no, I do not. Kakashi just sighed and said Raito, looks like we'll have to fight Zabuza by ourselves. Raito simply nodded and charged towards Zabuza with Jounin-like speed while Kakashi shouted, all of you protect Tazuna-san. With that, the Jounins nodded and stood in front of Tazuna with their weapons put to protect them. Zabuza was about to strike again, but only to be stopped by Raito shouting Yoroi. And lightning chakra surrounded him. But shocked Zabuza because the Raiden no Yoroi was a Kumo jutsu, and seeing that a random Jounin was able to master it, made Zabuza lick his lips in anticipation. Zabuza then instead of attacking Tazuna, went to slash Raito with his Kubikirabacho, but Raito managed to block it with his katana and went to give a leg sweep to Zabuza, only for the man to jump up and got kicked in the face by Kakashi, who was shouting Wacha. In a high-pitched tone like Bruce Lee. Zabuza then stumbled a few steps back and growled in pain. He then quickly did a few hand seals and shouted Mizugakur no Jutsu. Suddenly, a huge amount of mist surrounded everyone and Kakashi realized that the Sharingan can't see through huge amount of mist. This was when Zabuza said in the mist larynx, spine, lungs, liver, jugular, subclavian artery, kidneys, heart. Where shall be my killing point? In which Anko responded while joining the fight, none of them. But this, Zabuza was suddenly punched in the face by Raito, who somehow found the ninja. Zabuza then growled in pain and Kakashi got behind him and did a German suplex so that they could battle on ground. As Zabuza landed, he was suddenly grazed in the cheek by a random kunai that was thrown by Anko, only to find him disappearing in a puddle of water. This caused all three ninja to be dumbfounded and were suddenly wrapped in a globe of water named the Surum no Jutsu. A globe of water that traps its victims. Kakashi then growled in frustration and said Raito, Anko, we've been played. Raito simply slumped his shoulders, but Anko still unknowingly has the same stream of blood dripping from her nose while staring at Zabuza's figure. Kakashi then shouted to the Jounins who were now pretty close to the ground, all of you, protect Tazuna at all costs. Unfortunately for the Jounins and Tazuna, who was already peeing his pants, the mist were still huge and as Zabuza was about to slice Tazuna into pieces, his Kubikirabacho was blocked by Naruto Senshi. As Zabuza growled in frustration, Naruto smirked and said, now, this is something that I would like to see. Your Kubikirabacho versus my arsenal of weapons. Who would win? Zabuza then was kicked in the chest by Sasuke Sai, who decided to join the fight. With that, he stumbled a few steps back only for Naruto to add chakra into his knee and shouted Kinshasa to Zabuza's head. As he felt the impact, Zabuza widened his eyes and managed to think Kinshasa. Looks like I'll have to be serious from now on. Zabuza then quickly did a few somersaults backwards and landed on his legs. He then huffed into belief as Sasuke did a few hand seals and shouted Kaiten. Kikyaku no Jutsu. The boy then blew a huge amount of fire towards Zabuza. Zabuza quickly dodged the huge fireball only to be grazed in the shoulder by Sai's Tanto. Zabuza then landed on his back and felt a lot of pain. As Sasuke Sai was about to orchestrate another attack, Menma joined in to give Zabuza a punch to the face, only for him to be kneed in the gut by the said ninja and fainted. Zabuza then tried to decapitate him only to be blocked by Naruto, who quickly used his KMG Kryoku Manikba Jutsu and kicked the older ninja in the face. Naruto then quickly got himself into his dual Haicho Kenjutsu style and said, your fight is with me. I'll show you that Senshi and Kyofu no Ken can make your Kubikirabacho into a dandelion. But Zabuza growled in anger and went to strike Naruto with a huge swing. Naruto was quick enough to block it, but both Kyofu no Ken and Senshi went flying into a tree. Naruto then clicked his tongue in frustration and dodged another strike by Zabuza. He then jumped to back of Zabuza and kicked him in the back of the neck. As Zabuza went flying forwards, everyone else, except for Menma, were enjoying the scene. Natsumi and Mito simply thought in unison at the fight scene sugoi. While the others were just enthralled by the action. Naruto then sighed as Zabuza recovered from his fall and said with a sinister laugh, haha, how are you going to beat me now? You don't even have a sword. Naruto then chuckled and took out his storage scroll that kept Death Stalker. He then opened it and flipped it to poof out a Death Stalker in blade form. This made everyone there, except for Menma, interested by the giant blade that appeared in Naruto's hands. Zabuza then widened his eyes in surprise and asked, nice sword kiddo. But, that won't beat me. Naruto then smirked and clicked a button on the hilt of the blade so that it could transform into a scythe. This caused Zabuza to feel interested by what Naruto could do to him with a weapon like that. Naruto then said it's not only a sword, it's also a scythe. Naruto then quickly spun Death Stalker around and did a stance that Crow taught him. He then charged towards Zabuza with speed that left after images. This amazed everyone, except for Menma, at how fast Naruto really was. Even Kakashi could barely see where Naruto really was. With that, Zabuza could barely react in time to block Naruto's slash with his Kubikirabacho. The man then tried to kick him away, only for the boy to do a couple of backflips to escape. Naruto then did a couple of hand seals and shouted Gokubushin no Jutsu. With that, 3 of Hellfire clones of Naruto appeared out of nowhere and one of them equipped the hidden blades, while another equipped the sniper rifle and the final one used the Insatsuken pose. This caused Zabuza to be shocked by the boy's ability and quickly block a shot by the sniper Naruto clone. He then quickly threw a kunai and dispelled the clone. The barehanded clone then went to try and shuriken Zabuza only to hit a log that Zabuza managed to kawarimi and dispelled by itself. Zabuza then hid in the trees and suddenly heard a shink sound from behind. He then quickly backflipped away and attacked the clone by slashing it with his Kubikirabacho. The clone then dispelled and revealed the original that went for an horizontal spinning slash towards Zabuza but managed to shunshin away. As Naruto stared at the spot in disbelief, he was then kicked in the back and fell forward to the ground. Zabuza then laughed as he was readying to decapitate Naruto and said, you gave me a good fight. Sadly, I need to kill you. He then proceeded to go for the kill. As Naruto closed his eyes awaiting his death, the blow never came and when he opened his eyes. Naruto saw Migi who formed blades on his fingers that managed to block the giant cleaver by a long shot. This shocked everyone except for his team and Menma to see that a sudden eyeball appeared on his right hand. Kakashi then looked at Raito for an explanation who simply said that's Migi, a bloodline that Naruto has that is named as a Kasiju. He was planning to make his own clan with it though. Kakashi then nodded in understanding and continued spectating the battle. Naruto simply sighed and said thank you Migi, you're a lifesaver. Migi then quickly wrapped itself around Kubikirabacho and threw it around along with Zabuza. Zabuza then landed his back towards a tree and felt that he couldn't move anymore. Unknown to him, Naruto placed a paralyzing seal on Zabuza. With this, Yakumo and Sakura shouted while holding each other's hands in glee that was amazing. And everyone else, except for Menma, agreed. Naruto then said Migi, let me have control again. In which, Migi replied with doing as it was told. Suddenly, the water prison was dispelled and the Jounin instructors ran towards Zabuza. As they were about to interrogate him, a couple of senbon needles went flying towards Zabuza's neck and he went into a dead-like state. This shocked the Gownins and Naruto as a girl in blue robes and an Anbu mask appeared out of nowhere and said thank you for your help. I was chasing him down for a couple of days. The girl then straddled Zabuza on her shoulder but was stopped by Kakashi who decided to check on the pulse. As he was done checking, he then said alright, you're free to go. The girl ninja then nodded but was suddenly staring towards Raito for a couple of seconds while blushing under the mask. She then straightened herself out and disappeared in a shunshin. Raito, who was also blushing, straightened himself out as well and said okay guys, now let's go to Tazuna's house. As Naruto was about to reply, he suddenly blacked out. Chapter 7. A few hours later. Naruto suddenly woke up thanks to a slap by Migi. He then shook his head sideways and asked his parasitic companion hey, what happened? Migi then responded with a huff and said it seems that after you fainted, your team and siblings brought you to this room. It seems that it's actually your client's bare bedroom. Naruto then nodded and stretched both of his arms. He then turned sideways to see that all of his weapons were managed to be saved. Migi then suddenly said also, you should probably get downstairs now. It seems that your sister, Mito, is coming to this very room. It then went asleep because of the fight with Zabuza. As Naruto nodded, Mito opened the door and said Aniki, come downstairs, it seems that our host has prepared us dinner. With that, Naruto nodded and said alright. But I'm a bit sore, can you help me up? Mito then quickly crouched down and Naruto wrapped his left arm on her left shoulder since she was kind of scared at what Migi could do. Naruto then held on Mito to get up. They then left the room to get downstairs slowly so that they could eat dinner at the dining table. As Naruto sat down, he then saw two people he never knew, a woman and a younger boy. With that, Naruto then cleared his throat, went to the woman to bow and said hello, I'm Naruto, one of the assigned ninjas to protect Tazuna-san, who might you be? The woman then bowed herself in response and said I'm Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter. Thank you for going through a lot just to protect my father. Naruto then simply blushed at the woman's praise and said no worries, I'm just doing my job. As Tsunami was about to respond, the boy Naruto never knew suddenly got up from his seat after finishing his food and went upstairs, but not before giving Naruto a glare. Naruto was simply shocked and looked at Tsunami for an explanation. The woman simply sighed and said that's Inari, my son. You see, his father figure was killed by Gato for starting a rebellion against the tyrant. Till now, Inari is still bitter about it. With that, Naruto nodded and then proceeded to his own spot to finish his food. As he was eating, Raito suddenly came up to him and said hey Naruto, your siblings and your teammates went out to train with both Enko-senpai and my dad. So, I'm kind of bored here. Why not have a little spar? Naruto then nodded as he finished his soup. He then said to Tsunami-san, thanks for the food. Tsunami simply nodded as Naruto quickly Gokushunshin upstairs to the room where his weapons were. He then Gokushunshin outside to see Raito reading a pretty familiar book that Naruto owned. With that, he quickly checked his pocket to see that the book entitled The World Among Us written by Kouta Kazuraba this time, was simply gone. Naruto then glared at his sensei, in which Raito sheepishly smiled and gave back the book to the young genin. As Naruto scrambled for the book again, Raito then cleared his throat and said I found an open space around here, now come on. Raito then led the way for Naruto towards a pretty big open space that had trees that wasn't far from Tazuna's house. As they got there, Raito then stood a few meters directly against Naruto and got into a fighting stance. He then said alright, let's have a spar. Taijutsu, Kenjutsu and Ninjutsu allowed. However, you are allowed to use your other exciting weapons such as that thing with a scope on. Winner shall be decided by first blood. Naruto then chuckled and said that is a sniper, a weapon used to shoot enemies using gunpowder as accurate as possible. He then got into his own Taijutsu stance and continued now, let us spar. Raito then nodded and said Hajime. Both ninjas then ran towards each other and Raito went for a hook to the face while Naruto went for a jab. Per usual, the jab won and Raito stumbled a few steps back. The Jounin instructor then went on to defensive by putting his arms up as Naruto went for jabs after jabs after jabs. As Naruto finished his 7th jab, Raito went for a quick sweep to the legs so that Naruto could fall. Only for the young boy to jump up and went for an roundhouse kick. Raito then flew into a tree, thus causing a tiny crater to be made. With that, Naruto quickly threw a kunai only for Raito to block it with his katana. The Jounin then went on the offensive by creating 2 shadow clones and both of them decided to run towards Naruto in different direction with Jounin speed. The one on the left went for a sliding kick while the other went for a running knee. As it was the speed of a Jounin, Naruto simply felt both impacts and flipped horizontally to fall on his face. Naruto then quickly blocked Raito's slash with senshi and both had a stare down while pushing each other's blades. A few seconds later, Raito took the advantage and kicked Naruto's shin. Naruto then grabbed a hold of his shin and gave Raito's clones the opportunity to grab one of Naruto's shoulder each. With this, Raito went for a super kick only to find out that he kicked both of his clones since Naruto overpowered them and threw both of them directly towards Raito. As Raito's clones dispelled, he couldn't find Naruto anywhere, only to turn around to see Naruto running towards him while doing a tiger hand seal. He then realized Naruto was about to. "Take this, sensei. Your father's most infamous jutsu. Senengarashi," shouted Naruto. As Naruto inserted both sides of his index and middle fingers into Raito's anus area, Raito was then seen flying into a tree head first. Surprisingly, he didn't bleed. But had a minor concussion. As Raito got up, he then sighed and said, "I didn't have to do this, Naruto. But, you left me with no choice." He then did a few hand seals that Naruto could barely catch up and said Kaiten. "Kikyaku no Jutsu." He then blew a giant fireball towards Naruto. As the fireball went towards him, Naruto simply smirked and held out his left hand as dark chakra spun in a circular motion to reveal his trump card, the Dakisufia. Naruto then smirked and thrusted the Dakisufia towards the giant ball of fire to suck the chakra away. With this, Raito had to admit that the jutsu was definitely awesome, but he took the chance to shunshin behind Naruto and kicked him in the shin, only for him to be kawarimied with a log. As Raito was stunned, Naruto quickly took out both Senshi and Kyofu no Ken and jumped while slashing in a spinning motion towards Raito. He then shouted Haiten. Sadai Sarashu. Hearing that, Raito quickly blocked any slashes thrown by Naruto and pushed the young genin away. As he did so, the young genin then quickly got up and ran towards Raito with Chunin speed while doing a jumping knee to the head. As the knee connected, Naruto shouted Kinshasa. The knee then connected to Raito's cheek and he was about to fall. But the Jounin managed to do handstand and got back up by doing a back heel kick to Naruto's nose. As he did so, Naruto stumbled a few steps backwards while grabbing the newly injured area. Raito then gave Naruto a smirk as he saw a few drops of blood dripping from his hands. Naruto then sighed and let go of his hands as both nostrils spilled a lot of blood from his nose. Raito then chuckled and patted Naruto's head like an older brother would while saying, "You did great, Naruto. Now, I'm going to say this. Zabuza may not be dead, and the hunter nin but was interrupted by Naruto who was still wiping his nose said, "The one that you have feelings for." In which, Raito blushed and stammered and no, I'm just saying that she might be an accomplice. Tusen also said that we may have a week to rest and train until Zabuza comes back. Naruto simply chuckled as his nose stopped bleeding, sheathing his katanas, and said very well, sensei. They then looked up to the sky to see that the sun was setting down. With this, Raito said now, let's get back. It's getting very late and we had dinner pretty early. Naruto simply nodded and both ninjas went home via walking. Izuna's house. As they got back, they were invited by the scene of Sasuke and Sai playing a game of cards, Sakura, Yakumo, Natsumi and Mito chatting, men were reading a certain orange book while laughing perversely, and Kakashi and Anko were just talking about past missions. Izuna and Tsunami were nowhere to be seen. Perhaps they were sleeping and so did Inari. Naruto and Raito then looked at each other and Raito said call it a day. Naruto simply nodded and both ninjas went upstairs and went to their respective futons to sleep. The next week. Naruto had the feeling to train his butt off for an entire day and he did this for a few days. On the third day however, he and his brother Menma had a falling out as Menma thought that Naruto couldn't walk on trees, in which Naruto simply ran on it. So that strained their relationship even further as Menma was still struggling with tree walking, while the others who didn't master it yet did it in a matter of 2 days. Then, just now this happened. Flashback. Naruto was eating his plate of rice with fish in silence up until Inari suddenly slammed his arms on the table and said, "You ninjas should just give up, there is no way that you will kill Gato. He will just destroy you." With this, Tsunami was about to scold her son but was stopped by Naruto who ran up to the younger boy while grabbing the collar of his shirt with speed that the Horatian would be put to shame thanks to Haie giving chakra to boost his speed. Naruto then proceeded to raise him up so that he could see the boy directly in the eyes and said, "Hoi Gaki, you know one of my first and favorite senseis taught me that Gakis can only learn through roughness. So listen up, you think you've lived in a difficult life, huh? Losing your father figure at a young age was bad. Okay, I get that. But, have you ever knew the feeling of never existing in your whole family's eyes since the age of 3 and a pair of godparents who thinks I am just a attention-seeking brat? I had to scrape out my food from garbage at the age of 4 and had to make money at the age of 5 so that I could buy myself some clothes. I even had to a cow's butt just to earn 4 freaking ryo. 4 freaking ryo just to buy myself some rotten milk. That's the most that I could make. I then thought that my life would be over up until I met Tsukasa Kadoya. He gave me a gift on my 7th birthday and then I met my first senseis. They taught me everything I know up until now and even their respective wives, except for one of them since she's not from my village, taught me manners. And guess what? They're not even my own parents. Inari then proceeded to tear up as Naruto let go of the boy and said, all I see in you is just a coward who couldn't do a single bleep about the problem at hand. He then went to the door as he noticed Natsumi and Mito crying, Menma flinching a little bit and the others were just wondering how it felt like to be him. Naruto then said, I'm going out. If you need me, I might be in the same woods I've always been training at for the week. Naruto then opened the door and left while running and crying tears of sadness. Well, Migi couldn't help but to feel bad about its host state before he became a ninja in training. End of flashback. Here he was now waking up beside Raito, who decided to join in to train him to perfect his Kaiten affinity. No matter how many times Raito tried to leave Naruto alone, Raito simply could not as the boy was just like a younger brother to him. Even though he had Menma, Mito and Natsumi, he just could not help but to feel closer towards Naruto. As Raito got up, he saw the most beautiful, most majestic and the prettiest face he has ever seen. The girl whose face belonged to who was also wearing a pink kimono, shook him and said in a gentle tone, wake up Ninja-skun, you're about to get a cold. With that, Raito woke up with no sign of Naruto other than a note that says, I'm going back. See you later. N. With this, Raito sighed and said to the girl, thank you, say what are you doing? I'm Raito Haddock by the way. The girl then bowed and said, I'm Haku, I'm here to pick out some herbs for a friend so he could feel better. Raito then did a smirk that apparently some girls really enjoy seeing and said, can I help? In which the poor girl blushed by the sight of the smirk and nodded shyly. With that, Raito helped Haku to grab some herbs. After doing so, Haku asked, so why do you fight as a ninja, Raito-kun? Raito then put both of his arms on the back of his neck and said, I fight to defend the innocent, for peace among the 5 villages and for my loved ones. The girl then nodded and said, you will be a very strong ninja, that I can guarantee you. Haku then turned around and said also, I'm a boy. In which, Raito quickly sunshined in front of her, sniffed and said, there is no way that you are a boy, I live in a house where my dad is on frequent missions and my mom is almost always at, I can smell period blood on you. Because, I always needed to clean her mess. Raito then quickly gave her a wink and said also, tell Zabuza that Konoha will pay more than what Gatu is willing if both of you decides to join our village. Haku then widened her eyes at the mention of Zabuza and took out a senbon to get ready for a fight. Only to find out that Raito suddenly placing both of his arms around Haku's waist and gave her a passionate kiss. At first, Haku was too shocked about it but gave in to the kiss, dropped the basket full of herbs and placed both of her arms around Raito's neck to kiss back. Haku then got up and quickly put on her clothes. Same goes for Raito. As they finished, Raito then said to Haku, that was amazing. Anyways, tell Zabuza about my offer. Because, I want us to work. I want to be alongside you yet be in Konoha. Haku didn't say anything, but silently she wished for that too. Haku simply nodded and both enemies now lovers walked away from each other. When Raito got home, he noticed that it was pretty late and he needed more sleep. So he then went upstairs where the Gownins would sleep and hit the sack. The next morning, WSC Naruto waking up to shoutings of Inari. With that, he quickly got his equipment on and Goku Shunshin downstairs and punched both thugs in the face. Then, he quickly placed a paralysis seal on the thugs and both of them were immobilized. Naruto then turned around to see Tsunami hugging Inari with a lot of comfort. With that, he could not help but to smile at the boy and ruffled the young one's hair while saying, you've shown bravery, well done, Inari. Hearing this, Inari hugged the older boy's leg and Naruto simply hugged back. As they let go, Naruto ran out to the unfinished bridge to see his team and siblings. Unfinished bridge. As he got there, every one of his team, siblings and even the senseis were actually just lazing around. This made Naruto realize that something is wrong. He then went up to Yakumo and asked in confusion what's going on. Yakumo simply shrugged and said, we don't exactly know. Sasuke then interrupted by saying it seems that Zabuza and the accomplice haven't arrived yet. Suddenly, Zabuza and Haku appeared in a shunshin. As everyone except for Raito got into a fighting stance, Zabuza dropped his Kubikurabacho and placed his arms up while saying, we've agreed to your terms, Raito Haddock. With this, everyone except for Raito looked at the young Jounin while internally shouting Nani. Raito simply rubbed the back of his neck while saying, it turns out that Naruto was right, I do have feelings for her. Ain't that right? He then winked at Haku as he got close to her while wrapping his arms around her waist. Haku-chan. Haku simply blushed and placed her own arms, but not before taking off her mask. They then went for a passionate kiss only to be stopped by Zabuza who said it's cute and all but what do we do now? Kakashi then got close to Zabuza and said wanna play cards. As he took out a deck of cards. Zabuza simply nodded and both enemies turned allies went to set up a table for three so that they could play a game of poker alongside Tazuna, who decided to trust Zabuza surrendering. Naruto then sighed and said to his team, so what do we do now? Only for Anko to place a kunai around his neck and whispered, hi kiddo, nothing personal, but can you hook me up with that hunk? Referring to Zabuza. With this, all 5 of Team 11 looked at each other and wondered how destructive the pairing of Zabuza and Anko may be. But then again, it makes a bunch of sense. Naruto then came up with a suggestion and said, how about this, Anko-sensei? I sense that Gato is coming here with a bunch of thugs. So, why not show him how much bloodlust you really have? With this, he may even feel turned on by what you have and bada bim bada boom, you can become a couple. Anko then thought about it and licked her lips in anticipation while saying I think that is a great idea. Very well. With this, Team 11 and the siblings shook their whole body in disgust by the estranged Jounin instructor. A few minutes later, a shout was suddenly heard coming from a dwarf of a man who was wearing a suit, saying what kind of demon plays cards with their enemy. Zabuza then got up from his seat and said the smart kind. Gato, I knew that you wouldn't pay me. Don't try to lie. Gato then laughed and snapped his fingers as a whole group of men appeared and he had dispose. Gato then said of course, you guys are too expensive to deal with. Zabuza then was about to grab his Kubikirabacho but was stopped by Anko, who grabbed his cold arms with her warm ones and said Zabuza-kun, let me show you that you and I have a lot in common. Zabuza was confused by this, but when he saw the look on her eyes, it was definitely lust and also bloodlust. For some reason, it turned him on so badly. Batu then shouted kill them but leave the girls, he then licked his lips in lust and pointed towards Mito and Natsumi while saying looks like they have really good ones. As Gatu's forces were about to charge, the first line were killed by Anko thanks to her snakes in a matter of seconds. As this happened, Anko shouted you damn tyrant thinking you can do everything you want. Then, the second line were also killed thanks to Raito's Raiten, Tsuki Kato Surashu. A jutsu that allows a ninja to slash someone with speed and precision. But after what Raito did shocked everyone. As a huge killer intent came from a certain blonde. No one could see his face, but his bangs covered his eyes. The growl was then heard, and then Naruto said Killua, give me some of your energy. In the mindscape, Killua suddenly woke up and said alright, let's do this Naruto. He then held out his arms and started giving his host some energy. With this, lightning itself started to surround Naruto's arms and he smirked while saying no one touches my sisters or brother until I approve of it. This touched everyone's heart including Menma but only a little bit. Naruto then looked up and everyone saw the bloodlust coming from the young genin. As the Jounins there tried to stop him, Naruto quickly ran up to the group of thugs with Senshi on his right hand while Kyofu no Ken on the other with cage speed. This caused most of Gatu's forces to be decimated in a matter of seconds. When Naruto got towards Gato however, he simply smirked and stopped all of his bloodlust and sudden boost. With this, Gato pleaded please allow me to live. I'll give you anything you want. Money, women, slaves, giant houses, just allow me to live. Naruto then chuckled and placed his hand on his chin in a thinking motion. He then asked anything I want in which Gato nodded rather quickly only for his head to be sliced off from his body and blood started to sputter out. With this, everyone there including the newly arrived Inari and some other villagers with torches, pitchforks and knives who shouted Naruto Naichin, we came here to help. Naruto simply nodded and Goku shunshin away so that the villagers could do their thing and battle the remaining thugs. As he was about to faint, Raito caught him and said you did great Naruto. Naruto simply nodded and closed his eyes. The last thing he saw was Natsumi and Mito sitting near him while smiling at him. The next week, Naruto and the other genins trained together while protecting Tazuna and completing the bridge. Menma and Naruto's relationship got better as well, but it was still strained. Raito and Haku did their romantic gestures while avoiding the stare of Zabuza, which didn't happen too much as he was seen frequently with Anko doing the exact same thing. Seems like he has a thing for the mistress. Then the day came where the Konoha ninjas, Zabuza and Haku had to leave as the bridge was finished. As Naruto was getting his stuff ready to leave, Inari went up to him and hugged his leg while saying do you really have to go? Naruto simply chuckled while kneeling at the boys and said I must as my village needs me. With this, Inari started to tear up and Naruto replied by wiping the tears on his face while saying sometimes it's okay for men to cry. Remember that. Inari simply nodded and Rado shouted Naruto, are you coming? Naruto quickly said coming. He then ruffled the younger boy's hair and the group of ninjas walked into the sunset. A random villager then suddenly spoke up as the ninjas left what should we name the bridge? Tazuna then answered how about the Great Tazuna Bridge? Hahaha. Only to receive a hit from a frying pan by Tsunami and some grolong from other villagers. Inari then suddenly spoke up how about the Great Naruto Bridge? With this, everyone cheered and the Great Naruto Bridge was born. Chapter 8. A few hours later. As the group of ninjas reached the gates of Konoha, they were greeted by two Chunins who went by the name of Izumo and Katetsu who said, "Oh, Team 7, Team 11 and Zabuza Mamachi." The group then nodded and Raito said, "You see, they have decided that they would like to serve our dear Hokage-sama. As being in the life of a runaway can get a bit tiring." With that, both Chunins nodded and let them in, while Izumo said, "However, Zabuza, your Kubikirabacho will be detained until further notice." Zabuza simply complied and gave his Kubikirabacho to a random Anbunin who just appeared in a shunshin. As it happened, Kakashi said, "Alright everyone, let's go to the Hokage's tower to report a successful mission." With that, the group of ninjas nodded and walked towards the Hokage's tower to report. On the way there, Natsumi asked her eldest brother Naniki, "Why did Shout kill you during the fight at the bridge?" Naruto simply sighed as they were still walking and said, "I don't know, I just had a need to, and for some reason I was given a crazy power boost." Menma snorted at this only to receive 2 bonks from his sisters. With this, the Jounin instructors, Zabuza, Haku and Naruto's teammates laughed at this, and Haku thought maybe Konoha ain't that bad after all. Hokage Tower. Minato sighed as he finished a stack of paperwork and placed his head on his headrest while thinking, it's been more than a week. I wonder how are they doing. Thank goodness Naruto came up with that suggestion to have a joint mission. Or else, that would have been a disaster when I got that note saying that it might be in B to A rank. As Minato was about to start finishing another stack, a knock was heard and Minato answered, "Come in." The moment he finished saying that, the door was opened to reveal Kakashi, Raito, Anko, his children, Naruto's teammates and Zabuza and his apprentice. As everyone got in, Kakashi bowed and said, "Team 7 and Team 11 are here to report a successful A rank mission." With this, Minato nodded and said, "Please do so." Kakashi nodded and said everything in detail from their meeting with the Demon Brothers, the first and Anki battle with Zabuza, but leaving out Migi and Naruto's hidden abilities and Naruto killing Geto with a very odd type of chakra. That's about everything sensei, and Zabuza and his assistant Haku would like to join the village as shinobis. Reported Kakashi and nodded. Minato then nodded and did a thinking pose. With this, the room was in an awkward silence for a while, and Minato said, "Very well, Zabuza Mamachi and Haku," but was cut off by Zabuza who said, "Hokage-sama, if I may, could you register Haku's name as Haku Mamachi?" This made Haku to widen her eyes and said to her sensei now adopted father, "Zabuza-sama, are you adopting me?" With this, Zabuza nodded as he placed a hand on Haku's shoulder and said, "Yes, so now you can call me Two-san." Haku then couldn't help but to tear up, which made everyone in the room to feel touched by it. She then muttered while having tears on her eyes, "Arigato, Zab Two-san." Zabuza simply nodded as they both were given citizenship by Minato. As those were done, Minato sighed and said, "Alright, Team 7, 11 and Zabuza and Haku may leave." The ordered ninjas nodded and turned around. As they were about to leave, Minato continued except Naruto. Naruto simply stopped while the others left the room. As everyone else left, Naruto turned around to look at his father, and the atmosphere got awkward for a short while up until Minato said, "So, would you like to have lunch with me at Ichiraku's? My treat." Naruto was about to protest, but his stomach growled and nodded in defeat. With this, Minato nodded and got up while saying, "Alright, let's go." Naruto said nothing and the father and son left the room to Ichiraku's via walk. A few minutes later, they arrived to the stand and took a seat. As they did so, a familiar brunette named AM came out with a smile and said, "Welcome, Hokage-sama, and who are you?" She looked at Naruto with confusion. Minato simply sighed and did a forced smile while saying, "He's my eldest, Naruto." Naruto simply bowed and said nothing. AM nodded in understanding and asks how is that he has never been here before. As Minato was about to say something, Tucci came out and said, "AM, stop bothering them and let them order." With this, AM blushed in embarrassment and asked, "What would both of you like to order?" Minato quickly answered, "Just one miso ramen." He then looked at his son to ask something, but the boy beat his father to the punch and said, "I would like one miso ramen as well." AM simply nodded and went to the back to start making the noodles, while Tucci started making the broth. Meanwhile, Minato had to wonder and ask Naruto, "Why only one ramen? I appreciate that you're not like your mother and siblings who likes to eat ramen so much that my wallet keeps going dry, but why would you only order one?" Naruto sighed and said, "One thing that Levi Jichin taught me was that to not eat too much ramen. My first training with him was exactly like this." This made Minato to nod in agreement while thinking, great, now I have a Levi Jr. for a son. At least he doesn't have Levi's clean freak problem. But that final statement was debunked when Naruto went to inspect Kyofu no Ken's blade and saw that there was a chunk of wood on it. Thus, causing the boy to rage and wiped it off with a random piece of cloth. This made Minato to sweat drop and ask, "Anyways, how did you manage to beat Zabuza Mamachi? Did you use Migi?" Naruto simply nodded and said, "Yes, I did indeed use Migi to fight Zabuza. But before that, I used a bunch of weapons." weapons that the council would like to get their hands on. This made Minato to nod in understating and said, if you wouldn't mind, could I see your weapons? Naruto then did a thinking pose and said sure, but after we have lunch. Minato sighed in defeat while thinking, geez, whoever taught Naruto how to use these weapons must be really good. Meanwhile in another universe. Achuo. Sneezed Crow while making pancakes for his wife. The snot got itself into the pan which pissed him off and shouted, honor Minato. As he finished shouting, a very pregnant Winter came into the kitchen and asked Crow, why did you just shout out of the blue? Crow simply sighed and said, nothing, dear. Just really glad that everything is finally over. Back to Naruto's world. As the food arrived, Naruto asked the young waitress Ano, are you the AM that Itachi Nison likes to talk about? AM simply looked at the boy and asked, how do you know Itachi-kun? Naruto smirked and said, well, he was the one who started teaching me in the arts of the shinobi. And I must say, he really has good taste in women. AM blushed at this and went to the back to avoid talking to the blonde boy. Meanwhile Tucci laughed and said, wow, you are one little rascal. Aren't ya? Naruto nodded as he grabbed his chopsticks to eat his noodles. His first thought however was this some interesting set of flavors. The noodles complement the broth and the toppings are conveniently placed. However, I know Levi Jichin can do much better than this. But enough said, Naruto quickly ate his noodles in silence and so did his father. After they finished their food, Minato paid for the bill and they both left to a random training ground. As they got there, Minato said, so Naruto, about those weapons. Naruto nodded and quickly took out his storage scroll to flip it so that the weapons could appear in thin air. Minato then quickly observed the Death Stalker first since it looked like a large broadsword and thought nothing much of it. Up until Naruto pressed a button that caused the sword to transform into a scythe. With this, Minato fell onto his butt in shock and said, geez, that is a sword yet a scythe at the same time. That is simply brilliant. Naruto smirked at this and said, yeah, it really is. It's my second pride and joy. Minato then simply got up and inspected the sniper and the hidden blades, only to fall onto his butt yet again at how amazing they were. After Naruto showed off the capabilities of his weapons, Minato placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, that was amazing. But, I'm pretty sure that Levi, Shinsuke, Hanzo, Gintoki and Shadow can't teach you any of those. With this, Naruto nodded and said, I wasn't taught by them for any of these weapons. The people who taught me were simply summoned by Tsukasa Kadoya so that I could prepare for something big, or that's what I think. This made Minato to widen his eyes while thinking, dear Kami, he really is the child of the prophecy. Looks like I'll have to castrate sensei's balls. Minato then looked at his son who was inspecting his right hand, which has kept itself quiet for a very long time. The Hokage then cleared his throat and said, say Naruto, would you like to have a spar with me? Taijutsu and ninjutsu allowed. Naruto then quickly looked at his father and nodded. They then stood opposite of each other and both went into their respective stance. Minato took his normal stance where one of his hands was holding a kunai and his back foot's heel is slightly tilted. Meanwhile Naruto went into his usual strong style where his right hand is placed near his mouth and his left is extended. Minato then said, alright, let's do this, the winner is decided by first blood. Without further ado. Hajime. Naruto then smirked and quickly ran up towards Minato to do a sliding kick towards his father's shin. But, Minato reacted quickly by jumping up and went for a stomp on Naruto's face, only for the prodigy of the current year to dodge it and went for an upward kick to the face that connected to the jaw. As Minato was dazed for a short while, Naruto quickly applied a 3/4 face lock on Minato and performed a backflip over him while maintaining the face lock, turning it into an inverted facelicant, then landing in a sitting position to drive Minato's head back first down to the ground. This made Minato to land on the flute and felt a bit dizzy. He then quickly dodged an incoming chopping kick from his son and went to trip the boy by pulling his leg down. As Naruto fell, Minato quickly did a few backflips to form a number of hand seals and quickly placed his index finger below his lower lip to shout Kaiten. Gakyaku no Jutsu. Naruto then quickly substituted himself with a log and shunshine behind Minato to place his father's near arm over his shoulder, went for a waist lock and then lifts the opponent up while falling backwards, causing Minato to land on his neck and shoulders. As Naruto did this, he shouted Hanten Power Slam. Minato then quickly threw his unique kunai far away from Naruto to here I shined away from the spot. As he got there, he went for a thought, geez, just how strong is he? I know he's been trained by Levi, Shinsuke, Gintoki, Hanzo and Shadow. But seriously? Minato then quickly picked up his kunai to throw towards Naruto, but saw that Naruto had suddenly disappeared in a flash of darkness when the boy shouted hi. This made Minato to wonder just how fast is Naruto. He then found out his answer when Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him and cocked his fist back to go for a spinning uppercut to the nose while shouting shuriken. As Minato went flying upwards, a huge amount of blood flew downwards from the Hokage's nose, which meant Naruto had won the spar. Naruto then smirked as his father was still floating in midair. The Hokage then dropped flat on his face and said in a muffled tone, "Damn, I'm wusty with this." Naruto laughed, and so did Migi, who just recently woke up to see what just unfolded. Not only them but Naruto's prisoners, Hiei and Killua, were laughing as well. Minato then got himself up, dusted himself off and wiped the blood dripping from his nose. The Hokage then went up to his son and said, "Well done, Naruto, you have beaten me in a spar, and the only ones who could do that is Levi and your mother. I am simply impressed and I think you could become Hokage someday." Naruto simply shook his head and said, "Nah, you can give that to Menma, Tusan. I appreciate the thought, but I'd rather become a founder of a new clan." But this, Minato asked, "So, what would the clan's bloodline and name be?" Naruto he showed his father Migi and said, "The Kasijuu and the name will be, well, I haven't thought that far yet. Since, I would still like to have my name to be part of the Namikazes." This made Minato to tear up by this statement and dropped on one knee so that he was in the same level of his son to give the young lad a hug. Naruto was stunned by this, but hugged back. Minato still hugging his son, said, "Naruto, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push you away and I don't have a lay more cool excuse for what I did. What I did was simply despicable and your mother and godparents were at fault as well. I'm sorry for not giving you those fatherly good job, son." Or a thumbs up. "Whatever it'll take, I promise to make things right." But this, Naruto teared up as well and muttered, "Do you have any idea how long have I waited for you to finally admit to your mistakes?" Minato then hugged his son harder and shouted, "Oh Naruto, my boy. I'm sorry." The father and son then stood there for a while in complete silence. However, the silence was cut off when Menma was seen running away while shouting in agony from a certain fair-skinned girl with a slender build. She had brown eyes that were accentuated by her eyelashes extending into the corners of her eyes and was usually sporting an impassive expression on her face. Her most distinctive feature was her long, untamed red hair that falls past her shoulders with long parted bangs, framing either side of her face and one between her eyes. Her attire was a black shirt under a tan tunic with elbow-length sleeves and black skin-tight shorts. She wore black arm warmers, traditional black shinobi sandals with calf-length leg warmers covered by bandages, and a purple rope-like belt tied in an inverted bow around her waist. This was Taijutsu, one of Orochimaru's apprentices from the year before. As Menma was running, Naruto sighed and said, "Geez, I knew that he was an idiot, but peeping on Taijutsu of all people was beyond idiocy." Minato nodded at this and mentally face-palmed. He then asked his son, "Do you think your brother has a thing for her?" Naruto then quickly went into a thinking pose and said, "Well, most probably, I mean Menma always had been reading that disgusting book." This made Minato to widen his eyes while thinking, "So my youngest ended up being a pervert." Great. Naruto then stretched his arms out and said, "Anyways, I would need to do something before I get home. So Tusan, you should probably go to your office to finish off your paperwork." But this, Minato nodded and said, "Very well, see you later at home." The father and son left in different directions. As Naruto was walking towards Haichu's, he noticed a familiar toad pervert with binoculars peeping a bathhouse from behind a tree that was on a hill. Naruto simply sighed at this and shunshin behind the sage to place a temporary paralyzing seal on the man's back. But this, Jiraiya fell down on his torso and rolled down the hill to suddenly crash into the lady's bathhouse. Which the sage could only say one thing in front of a room filled with naked and very angry ladies. Fuck. As Jiraiya got pummeled by the ladies, Naruto smirked at this and thought to himself, serves him right Naruto, then decided to just go ahead to Haichu's, only to suddenly bump into Levi, who was actually on his way to Naruto. As they bumped into each other, Levi said, "So, you had your first C rank mission, huh?" In which Naruto replied, "Yup. But it then upgraded into an A rank." But this, Levi smirked, but it disappeared rather quickly when Naruto looked at him. The former nin then said, "Your first C rank mission was exactly like mine. It was a C at first, but it somehow changed into an A rank later." Naruto simply nodded and said, "So, did you use your Kamimoto?" Though expecting a shook from the head, Levi nodded and said, "Yeah, I did, but it was because I had to make sure that Shinsuke and Gintoki were out of harm's way. We were facing a very tough ninja. However, I have forgotten his name." But this, Naruto sighed and said, "Dang, I wished I could have used the Kamimoto when I faced Zabuza." Levi simply looked at his surrogate nephew and said, "Wait, what? You've faced Zabu-kun?" This made Naruto to muffle a laugh and said, "Wait, Zabu-kun?" Levi then quickly cleared his throat and said, "Well, about 13 years ago, the other Gownins and I were presumed dead and we couldn't live in Konoha as Sandaime-sama wanted us to be sure that people thought that we were actually dead. So, we decided to go to Kiri and we suddenly met this young kid named Zabuza. Though, he only demanded Kenjutsu masters, so Gintoki and I taught him everything we knew. However, we didn't know that he wasn't right in the mind. So yeah, that's how Zabu-kun became the feared ninja of the mist." As Levi finished talking, Naruto mouthed out an "oh." And said, "So, that's why he could predict my attacks." With this, Levi chuckled and said yeah, I know. Talking about him, I think he's about to appear out about now. Naruto then looked behind to see Zabuza appearing in a shunshin and shouted, hey Gaki, we need to tell Levi-sensei. You're alive. Levi simply nodded as he placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and said wow Zabu-kun, looking good. Though, those bandages doesn't fit you at all. What changed? The former swordsman of the mist simply sweat dropped and said, don't call me Zabu-kun, sensei. Especially in front of my Musum. With this, Levi widened his eyes and went to look behind Zabuza to see Haku fidgeting with her bangs. Levi then said never thought you would end up being a father. I must say she's really pretty and it seems that she has already been deflowered. With that statement, Haku muttered an eep. And blushed while Zabuza turned around to see that what Levi said was actually true. With this, Zabuza said Haku, what does my sensei mean by deflowered? Haku then simply smiled sheepishly while scratching her neck and said you see well, sorry you see when I met Raito-kun for the second time, I kinda did it. As Haku finished what she said, Zabuza suddenly had raging flames in his pupils and said that boy he dares making my daughter pregnant. Haku then simply did a no motion and said no, he didn't get me pregnant. We did the kind of safe one. With this, Levi said with no emotions present on his face you mean anal and oral right. This made Zabuza to turn around towards his former sensei and shouted, how can you say something like that, sensei? In which Levi answered old enough to kill is old enough to fuck. As Haku was about to protest, Zabuza slumped his shoulders and said yeah, I guess you're right. Also sensei, I was wondering if Haku and I can live at your place. In which, Levi nodded and said sure, but please don't mind all of your first senseis playing poker and stuff like that. Zabuza smiled under his bandages at this, but then realized that Naruto had disappeared when Levi talked about deflowering. With this, the demon of the mist sighed and asked his former sensei for a tour. Back to Naruto, he was walking back home as he didn't want to listen about to deflowering, since he had been reading too many books and he knew what deflowering could really mean. Anyways as he was walking home, he noticed Menma who had cuts and bruises was limping on his own way home. Being the responsible brother that he was, Naruto quickly grabbed Menma's hand over his shoulder and helped him walk. As Menma was about to protest, Naruto simply shook his head that gave a message of no, you are injured. I'll get us home. Now, come on. As arrogant Menma may be, he knew he would reach home way after dinner time. With that, he obliged while closing and both walked towards the Namikaze compound. By the time the two brothers got there, Kushina who suddenly felt her motherly instinct going quickly ran to the front door to see Naruto helping out Menma. By this side alone, Kushina knew that there was a chance for Menma and Naruto to reconcile after all. Her thoughts however came into an abrupt stop when Naruto said Ka-Samson, Menma went to peep on Taiya and probably got the lights beaten out of him. He needs medical attention now. But this, Kushina nodded and quickly got Menma to the sofa while Naruto quickly got an ice pack and placed it on Menma's bruised ankle. As Naruto placed the ice pack, he then said to his mother Ka-san, please hold the ice pack on that bruise while I'll try to take the pain away. Kushina not being one to take orders simply nodded and kept the ice pack on her youngest son's foot. Naruto then quickly did a few hand seals and shouted Fuin. Bodhi no kate. He then slammed his palm on Menma's chest and all of a sudden, the cuts and bruises on Menma disappeared in a matter of seconds. But this, Kushina looked at her eldest with shock while thinking, what kind of Fuin technique is that? I mean, I am a level 10 Fuinjutsu master oh wait, Shadow taught him. Yet again, her thoughts came to an abrupt stop when Naruto who was clutching his head in pain, suddenly said Nakasan, can you get me some eggs and a cup Shadow sensei said that the jutsu will make you full drosy. But this, Kushina noticing that her eldest was in pain, quickly nodded and grabbed 3 pieces of eggs and a cup from the kitchen. She then quickly brought them up towards Naruto which the boy quickly cracked all 3 of them and let the yolk to get into the cup. As Kushina was about to question her son, Naruto quickly chugged the contents down, in which Kushina cringed and thought, did he just drink 3 raw eggs? Naruto, who saw his mother's confused expression quickly said Shadow sensei said that the only way he could take away the drowsiness is by consuming 3 raw eggs. So I decided to just go with it. This made Kushina to smile and said well whatever makes you happy, Sachi-kun. As his mother finished saying that, Naruto couldn't help but to smile and thought that from now on everything would be okay. In the mindscape. Killua and Hiei were simply laying their backs on the tree in abrupt silence. Everything was good. Just calm and peaceful silence up until Tsukasa appeared and said hey Killua, Hiei. I have a task for the both of you. Both prisoners simply looked at each other for a while and then looked at Tsukasa while saying in unison, what is the task? But this, Tsukasa smirked and said do not go into Naruto's memories. That is it but was interrupted by Killua who said, but we're doing that already. Tsukasa then sighed and said no, what I mean is that. At one point or another, the Namikazes and the Sannin would need to get into Naruto's mindscape to save him, and I never got to punish them for neglecting young Naruto before. But this, Killua and Hiei gulped in fear as they knew what Tsukasa meant. By placing the Demon King into Naruto's deepest area of his mind as the boy's inner demon. Chapter 9. Playing with Summons. A few days later. Naruto yawned in boredom as he waited for his teachers to open up Haichu's. He stood there since 9 am, and by this point it was 11 am. Which should have been the time his teachers would open up shop. His teachers sent him a letter saying that they should meet up by 9. But yet again they still haven't opened up. All of a sudden, Shinsuke opened the door and said, "Naruto, we were waiting for you at the back, you should have just walked there." Naruto stared at his Taijutsu sensei and sighed. He then sheepishly smiled and said, "Alright, I'll just shunshin there." Shinsuke widened his eyes and said, "Wait, don't." But it was too late as Naruto Goku shunshine to the back of the shop to leave massive burn marks onto the front door. Shinsuke sighed as he closed the door and said, "That brat." At the back of Haichu's. Naruto then sat in the middle as his teachers surrounded him in some sort of circle. It seemed as if they were gonna do some ritual. Naruto then said as if the incident before never happened, "So, why did you call me here again?" Levi cleared his throat and said, "Naruto, all of us has decided that at least one of us would hand you our summoning contract, however, you need to listen to what we have to say." Levi then took out his summoning scroll and said, "This is the Titan summoning scroll where big gigantic humanoid creatures use their bronze in the heap of battle. They have gigantic teeth that can cut through human flesh very easily, the only downside is that they're technically naked." Naruto furrowed his eyebrows at that and mentally noted that's fucked up. Naruto then looked at Gintoki who held out his summoning contract. Gintoki then said, "This is the Bakugan summoning contract, where they are these creatures which does not limit to dragons, fairies or even chimeras, they are some that use water, fire and lightning. The only downside is that you summon them through smacking a small ball onto the ground." Naruto was interested at first but lost interest about the ball smacking part. Naruto then looked at Shadow who held his own summoning contract. Shadow rubbed his wrist and said, "This is the Covenant summoning contract where these creatures uses technology such as guns and swords that can cut through almost anything. There are no ninjas who owns these kinds of weapons, thus making them useful for any summoner. The only downside is that they're annoying." Naruto sweat dropped at this. As if no one's annoying to him. Naruto then turned towards his undead teacher who took out his summoning contract. Scorpion then cleared his throat and said, "This is the Ghoul summoning scroll, they are creatures who may seem human, but they're not. They eat humans to survive, but they drink a lot of coffee. Other than that, they have weird ass eyes and are super durable on the field, the only downside is that they may eat you while you sleep if they're really hungry." Naruto shuddered at that and said to himself, "No thank you, I ain't getting my eaten." Naruto then turned to look at Shinsuke who was still mad at him. Naruto then sighed and said, "Look, I'm sorry sensei, I was in a big hurry and kinda anxious, why did all of you wrote me a letter all of a sudden?" Even though Scorpion sensei could have sneaked into my room, the other senseis chuckled at this. Shinsuke then reluctantly nodded and said fine. Shinsuke then took out his summoning contract and said, "This is the Zilla summoning contract, they are ruthless creatures that shoot atomic breaths towards their foes and are able to shake the world just by walking for some odd reason, they conduct lightning to charge their power surprisingly, they are agile and have large powerful tails, only downside is that they have 2 brains, which makes them extremely clumsy." Levi then coughed yet again to gain Naruto's attention and took out another summoning scroll. He then said, "Now this is an old summoning scroll that we found on our journey here, it is the Grim summoning scroll. According to legend, they have no soul and were accidents that the Sage of the Six Paths made. They are reports that they could be humanoid wolves, some even are birds, heck they are also reports that they are just some random spirit lurking around." Levi then clapped his hands once and said, "Now choose wisely." Naruto nodded at this and closed his eyes, wanting opinions from both of his tenants. In his mindscape, Hiei and Killua discussed for a few minutes and they both decided on one summoning scroll. The Zilla one. Killua then said, "The Zillas they seem to be kind of fitting for a guy like you." Meanwhile Hiei simply nodded. Naruto then nodded to himself and said, "I shall pick the Zilla summoning contract." Every single one of his sensei looked at him for a few seconds with a blank expression. Shinsuke then smiled and said, "Alright, bite your thumb," and then signed your name onto the contract with your blood. Naruto nodded at this and bit his left thumb as he didn't want to wake Migi up and quickly wrote his name onto the blank space. As he did so, all of a sudden Naruto was transported to another dimension. He was transported to a land which had one live volcano, there wasn't anything but black rocks and obsidian. Naruto then blinked his eyes for a few seconds as he heard a loud powerful earth-shattering roar, accompanied by a shot of lightning. Naruto then looked up as he saw the king of the Zillas, Godzilla himself. He then gulped as Godzilla shouted, "How dare you come to my domain?" Naruto didn't flinch as he was on a mission. A mission to prove his worthiness of using the power of summoning the Zillas. Godzilla smirked at this and said, do you want to be eaten that badly? Naruto shook his head at this and quickly took out Kyofu no Ken and Senshi. Naruto then licked his lips and said, I'm here to show my worthiness of using power of the Zillas. Godzilla then smirked and said, do you have any idea how many men came from my clan's power and died in such dishonor? Some mutilated, some disintegrated, and heck, they people who smitten. Only one ever got to use my power, and he was lucky. Naruto shook his head and said, ain't no mountain high enough, you're just a big one. Naruto then ran towards Godzilla with full speed and slashed at the Zilla's throat, only to be smacked aside by the monster's paw. Naruto gritted his teeth in pain as he quickly glided towards the monster's eye and slashed at its cornea. Godzilla stumbled at this and quickly flicked Naruto off his eye. Naruto then was thrown into a heap of obsidian. But it only grazed his arm. Naruto then sighed and shouted, kill ya. All of a sudden, Naruto was enveloped in electricity and rushed towards Godzilla's chest. But he forgot one thing, Zilla are able to conduct electricity, which causes Naruto's attack to be futile. Thus, Naruto simply hit his head onto the monster's thick skin, which causes Naruto to be rendered unconscious for a few minutes. Godzilla then grabbed a hold of Naruto and said as he brought Naruto closer to his face, any last words? Naruto then said one. He then clasped his hand and a black sphere was created, which Godzilla could tell that it was a powerful jutsu. Naruto then jumped out of the paw and was about to slam his Dakisufia towards Zilla's chest. Godzilla widened his eyes at this as Naruto slammed his jutsu onto Godzilla's chest. The Dakisufia then absorbed as much atomic energy it could take and it caused Godzilla to weaken. With this, the king of Zillas fell onto the ground back first with a big thud, which caused the whole land to shake. Naruto somehow managed to grab onto the Zilla's skin and landed onto the monster's chest to cushion his fall. Naruto then stood triumphant onto the monster's chest and said in an exhausted tone, and I am your new summoner, you got that? Godzilla nodded reluctantly as he was beaten by another human. What if Neglected Naruto kills the council elders? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.